Chapter 1105. When we were about to make our move, I sent people to keep an eye on Minghuang Mountain. I didn't want this bitch to escape. Madame Blackpool walked under the eaves and said angrily, I searched everywhere but I couldn't find her. Where is she hiding? There's no need to look for her. She left a long time ago. The king of the Black Mountain, who had been silent, suddenly sighed. He handed over the jade archive in his hand and said, She left this on the grindstone before she left. She left it for you. Take a look. Left a long time ago? Could it be that she can really predict the future? Madame Blackpool took the jade archive with a puzzled look. It read, Since I want to steal the host's place, I will leave early. Wu Yinfang, don't worry about me. It was just a few words, but Madame Blackpool's face darkened. She smashed the jade archive into pieces and looked around. You must be hiding in Minghuang Palace. I will find you. How do you know she is hiding in Minghuang Palace? The Black Mountain King frowned. Do I need to ask? Madame Blackpool said angrily. Ever since our bodies were destroyed in the immortal realm, you have never called my name in the underworld. How could she know that my real name is Wu Yinfang? It's obvious that she heard the conversation between us and Jin Tai. That's why she knows that I'm called Wu Yinfang. But now she's deliberately mystifying us. She wants to confuse us so that she can escape. I won't let her succeed so easily. Calm down. Bai Qi is not an ordinary person. If Bai Qi can call her the underworld saintess, she must have something special about her. The king of the Black Mountain carefully looked around the simple furnishings in the courtyard, as well as the black sand that was ground by spirit stones, and slowly said, I've long heard that this underworld saintess is proficient in the art of divination. Maybe she really is a prophet. You believe this nonsense? If she really can predict the future, Bai Qi wouldn't have been defeated today, and he wouldn't have let me live until now. Madame Blackpool said through gritted teeth. That bitch can only fool that bookworm Bai Qi with her tricks. She can't fool me. Even if I have to turn the entire Minghuang Mountain upside down, I'm going to find that bitch. As soon as she finished speaking, Madame Blackpool left in a hurry again. The king of Black Mountain frowned and shook his head. He entered the underworld saintess's house and carefully observed the decorations inside. Several streams of light flew quietly in the sky above the netherworld. They were Jin Tai, Bai Qi and the others. Everyone's expressions were ugly. The most uncomfortable ones were Jin Tai and Bai Qi. The two of them had ruled the immortal and netherworld for so many years. First, there was Bai Changchun, then there was Wang Qing, and now there was the king of Black Mountain. When did the immortal emperor and netherworld emperor become so easy to bully? In the end, we have been living a comfortable life for too long. Otherwise, we wouldn't have suffered such a defeat. If we were prepared, these people wouldn't be able to do anything. We were too careless. Kintai suddenly let out a long sigh and looked back. After confirming that no one was chasing after them, he gestured to everyone and took the lead to hide in a rocky stream below. The rest of them also followed him down there. Only Jintai, Bai Qi, Qianjun, Aojun, and Tianjun were left in the stream of rocks. None of Bai Qi's subordinates escaped. They were all killed by the Divine Wind staff. Bai Qi was still angry at Jintai. He didn't respond to Jintai's words along the way. Jintai knew that Bai Qi blamed him for not rescuing his trusted subordinate, Huang Jiaxingjun, in time. Jintai released his divine sense to scan the surrounding area. After making sure no one was around, he sneered at Bai Qi. You are too soft-hearted. No wonder you raised that bitch Blackpool. Raising that bitch can at least please me in bed. It's better than you helping Black Mountain raise Wu Xiong's eldest son. Bai Qi immediately retorted. Silver Armor and Qianjun, who were immersed in sorrow, couldn't help but look at Jin Tai. Jin Tai Ning was speechless. He glanced at Bai Qi's subordinates. To be honest, he was actually quite envious of Bai Qi. He had long wanted to ask Bai Qi for advice on how he could bring out such a group of loyal subordinates who were willing to die. However, he could not bring himself to do so. Is there any point in saying this now? We are really stray dogs now. Let's think about how to turn things around first. Jintai glanced at the storage bracelet on Bai Qi's hand and lightly said, What is the secret of your obsidian light mirror? Why are Wu Feng and his sister so eager to get it? If there is a secret that can help us turn things around, Why don't you say it now? What is there to hide now? Although Bai Qi was angry, he also knew that now was not the time to fight. It was better to work together and discuss a good plan. After pondering for a moment, he said, Obsidian Light Mirror's original name is not this. There is a record left by Coiling Dragon in the Netherworld God's Palace. It is called Yin Yang Mirror. Jintai's eyes immediately lit up. How can the treasure mentioned by Coiling Dragon be easy to obtain? Is it because you can't use the power of this treasure? Otherwise, how could you block the Divine Wind Staff? It is true that I can't use the power of this treasure, but the true power of this Yin Yang Mirror is not reflected in fighting. Bai Qi glanced at Silver Armor Army and the others. They were all his trusted subordinates, so there was nothing to hide. He immediately said with a solemn expression, According to the records of Coiling Dragon, the Yin Yang Mirror can see through the two realms of Yin and Yang, and control the cycle of life and death. It is said that those who can use the power of this treasure can see anyone's fate and reincarnation. In other words, it can show you who you reincarnated from in your previous life. It can also control what you reincarnate into in your next life, whether it is a human, a dog, a pig, a cow, and so on. When they heard this, they were all shocked. They didn't think that there would be such a treasure. It was a little too magical. Jintai was stunned. I'm afraid even a divine weapon can't use such a miraculous effect. It can see through the yin and yang, and control the cycle of life and death. This treasure is too heaven-defying. I don't know whether a divine weapon has such a miraculous effect or not, but according to the records of Coiling Dragon, this treasure is even older than a divine weapon. It is a treasure that was born when the two realms of yin and yang were still in chaos. Later, because this mirror absorbed the yin eye and yang eye of yin and yang could not see each other, so they could not mix together. Thus yin and yang were separated, creating the two realms of yin and yang. It is said that this mirror represents the yin-yang eye. This is too mysterious and too profound. I still don't understand what it means. Bai Qi shook his head and sighed. Older than a divine weapon. Jintai's throat moved slightly, and a trace of greed flashed in his eyes. Bai Qi saw this and coldly snorted. Unfortunately, this thing fell in the underworld when the two realms of yin and yang were divided, so it is destined to be a treasure of the underworld. Jintai, don't let your imagination run wild. Even if this thing is given to you, you have no way to control it. In your hands, it is less than a piece of scrap iron. Nonsense, when did I let my imagination run wild? Jintai's expression did not change, and his heart did not jump as he said, I am just curious. Although this treasure is magical, it is actually a bit weak. In terms of power, it is not even comparable to the Wind God Staff in Wu Feng's hands. Why are the Wu siblings so anxious to get it? This is mainly because of the words of Coiling Dragon in the Netherworld God Palace. He said that only those who can wield the Yin-Yang Mirror are worthy of being the ruler of the underworld. Bai Qi revealed a trace of a bitter smile, and slightly shook his head. It is because of this insignificant sentence. Coiling Dragon once controlled the entire Styx, and was the main god that the Styx's water race worshipped. And those old fellows in the Netherworld God Palace who desired to ascend to the divine realm took the words left behind by Coiling Dragon as a divine decree, making people helpless. Jintai, now you should understand why this obsidian light mirror is so important, right? Jintai pondered for a while, and then nodded thoughtfully. I understand. I used to think it was strange that the water race of the Styx's united forces were so powerful, and they had so many masters, but they never interfered with the rule of the underworld emperors of the past. This was somewhat illogical. It turned out that the underworld emperors of the past had the obsidian light mirror, which is also known as the yin-yang mirror. To put it bluntly, those old fellows from the Netherworld Divine Palace are just flattering the Coiling Dragon god. In short, it's not because this mirror is powerful, but because it represents the teachings of the Coiling Dragon god. Exactly. This is what it means. This obsidian light mirror is the symbol of the ruler of the underworld. No matter who sat on the throne of the underworld emperor of the underworld, if they did not have this obsidian light mirror, they could not be considered a true emperor of the underworld. Once they had a conflict with the water race of the Styx, or provoked the old fellows in the Netherworld God Palace. If they could not take out the obsidian light mirror to control the situation, they would not give face to the Emperor of the Underworld. It is estimated that no one could sit firmly on the throne of the Underworld Emperor. This was the reason why the Wu siblings were anxious to get the obsidian light mirror. Without the yin-yang mirror, they did not have the right to truly rule the underworld. At this point, he could not help but look at the vast netherworld. The night wind blew, and he did not know if he could get back what he had lost today. He smiled slightly bitterly. In fact, I think that only the past emperors of the underworld who had wielded the obsidian light mirror could truly understand the true meaning of Coiling Dragon's teachings. Coiling Dragon said that only those who could wield the yin-yang mirror were worthy to be the ruler of the underworld. It did not mean that anyone who had the yin-yang mirror could be the ruler of the underworld. The key word was wield the yin-yang mirror, meaning that only those who could truly use the power of the yin-yang mirror could be the ruler of the underworld. Everyone had misunderstood Coiling Dragon's meaning, but these words, to those who regarded Coiling Dragon's teachings as the decree of God, if you could not take out solid evidence to convince them, if you dared to speak nonsense, they would probably regard it as tampering with the decree and then beat you to death. Chapter 1106. Hearing this, Silver Armor Army and the other two showed an expression of understanding. They had learned something new. Jin Tai, on the other hand, had lost interest in the obsidian light mirror because it was of no use to him. He didn't have the mood to get entangled in such a topic. To him, nothing was more important than regaining control of the immortal world. His eyes flickered as he said, "Bai Qi, can this obsidian light mirror get the help of the experts of the Styx's water race and the old fellows of the Netherworld Spirit Estate to help us regain what belongs to us? I hope the obsidian light mirror has that ability, but do you think it's possible?" Bai Qi said with a mocking expression. The Coiling Dragon gods didn't say that they have to listen to the command of the yin-yang mirror's wielder. Do you really think they're fools? They're all a bunch of old fools. They're not as stupid as you. If the obsidian light mirror could really command the entire netherworld, I'm afraid it wouldn't have fallen into my hands. Those old fellows would have come out of the mountains to snatch it, and I wouldn't be with you until today. Let's use our brains and find another way out. Jin Tai thought about it and said with some anger, "Then what do you think we should do? Are we supposed to hide here forever? Staying here isn't a long-term solution. We'll be discovered sooner or later. We have to find a safe place to settle down first, then think of a way to deal with that Wu Feng and his family." Want to find a safe place to settle down? Where is there a safe place for us to settle down now? Bai Qi sneered. How about the Netherworld Spirit Estate? You have the obsidian light mirror. Those old fellows shouldn't stop you from finding a place to settle down there. Jin Tai said naturally. Bai Qi nodded. It will help us settle down, but don't forget, Wu Feng was able to bring out the Wind God Staff from the Netherworld Spirit Estate. That means he can also enter and exit the Netherworld Spirit Estate. Although we don't know the reason, it's very likely that he has a close relationship with one of the almighty beings inside. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to safely bring out a treasure like the Wind God Staff. In this situation, do you still dare to take this risk? Qin Tai's expression froze, and he said helplessly, "We can't stop Wang Qing's sword-drawing style in the immortal world, and the underworld can't beat his father's Wind God Staff. However, we didn't dare to rashly step into the human world, as we were afraid of incurring the wrath of the heavens. The golden lightning that filled the sky still gave me lingering fear. It was too frightening. It's a pity that it's not time for the divine ruin realm to open yet. Otherwise, after we enter, we can join hands to seal the passageway, and when the time is right, we can open the passageway to take revenge. We probably can't win against Wu Feng even if we go to the Netherworld God Manor, and we can't enter the forbidden area of the underworld. Don't tell me there's no place for us to stand within the several realms? How did we end up like this? It's all your fault. If you hadn't eradicated the Wind Evolution sect back then, would there be such trouble today? However, that ghost world forbidden land," Bai Qi said thoughtfully. "I wonder what method that Bai Changchun used to enter and exit the mysterious forbidden land. Speaking of which, if we can rope in Bai Changchun's help, who knows, Maybe that old brat's amazing skills can break the divine wind staff. By Changchun? Emph. Do you think that's possible? You almost killed him back then. And he kept saying in the Immortal Palace that he would take my life in the future. There's no way to resolve the grievances between us. At this moment, Kim Tae realized that he seemed to have pushed him too far. He couldn't find a way out. His face gradually became ferocious as he said, "If you push me too far, then don't blame me for being impolite." Oh. Bai Qi dragged out the last syllable and said with some disdain, "How can you be impolite? It's already come to this. Are you still being polite to them? Why can't I see that?" Jintai said with a savage expression, "Open all the demon realm seals in the immortal and netherworld, and the 72 realms of the human world. Open the 74 demon realm passageways that the demon god opened back then. Even if you can't open them all, just opening one is enough. I'm sure that the 3 knights will seize the opportunity to lead the heroes of the demon world to the 3 realms again." Demon King 3 knights. The silver-armored army, purple-armored army, and blue-armored celestial army all cried out in shock. "You're crazy." Bai Qi was very moved as he said sternly, "Back then, we spent a great deal of effort to seal the 3 knights and his group of demons in the demon world. Once you open the demon world, the 3 realms will once again fall into the hands of the demon Dao, who in the 3 realms can be the 3 knights' opponent. Back then, even those old fellows in the Netherworld God Palace had to think twice and didn't dare to provoke them. So many years have passed. Have you thought about how terrifying the 3 knights is now? Let's not talk about this for now. Back then, it was you and I who used a scheme to seal them. When the 3 knights comes out, the first thing he will do is seek revenge on us. At that time, there really will be no path to heaven or door to hell." Jintai was silent for a while. From his abnormally serious gaze, it could be seen that he was also very afraid of the Demon King 3 knights. After thinking for a while, he looked at Bai Qi and asked indifferently, "If we are forced into a corner and the 3 knights is willing to let us go and save us, are you willing to open the demon realm passageway and let the 3 knights out?" "The 3 knights will let us go and save us? Don't talk nonsense. That's impossible. We sealed them for so many years, and they want nothing more than to swallow us alive. How could they let us go?" Bai Qi suddenly raised his hand and said sternly, "Let's stop here. I will not agree to open the demon world again. Let's not talk about this anymore. We should think of another way. Actually, if you really force me to that point, you should know that I can open the seal of the demon world by myself. I don't need your permission." Jintai stared straight at Bai Qi and said slowly, "Back then, after sealing the demon world, you took a piece of cloth stained with the blood of the 3 knights, and said that you have a secret technique to communicate with the 3 knights of the demon world through the blood on the cloth. Presumably, you weren't lying at that time." Bai Qi sneered. "You want me to communicate with the 3 knights of the demon world and negotiate with him on the condition that he let us go and help us, and we open the demon realm passageway to release him?" "That's right. That's right." Jintai nodded. Bai Qi raised his hand and pointed at his own head. With a face full of ridicule, he said, "Use your brain and think about it. Even you, Lady Jean, go back on your word and have no integrity to speak of. Could it be that you dare place your hopes on San Yi to keep his word? He can easily agree and deal with you after he comes out." Jintai calmly said, "We can make him swear on the demon god curse. From the 1 night demon monarch to the 2nd night demon monarch to the 3rd night demon monarch. They are all direct descendants of the demon god. They worship their ancestor the demon god to the extreme. As long as the 3 knights swears on the demon god, he will not dare to violate the oath and blaspheme the demon god. We can use this to negotiate the conditions. What is there to be afraid of? Of course, unless the 3 knights is willing to be trapped in the demon world and not come out. In that case, there is nothing we can do. But I'm sure he wants to come out." Bai Qi shook his head. "You're crazy. With the passage of time, if the 3 knights doesn't take the oath seriously, I can't imagine how miserable your death will be. I know this method is very risky, but if we are forced into a dead end, we will die either way. Since there is a glimmer of hope, why don't we try it? At least if we die, we can drag them down with us. No one will have an easy time. Just think of it as revenge. There is nothing bad about it, Jintai said with a self-mocking tone. What do you think? Don't you want to take revenge for the Huangjiasheng army? The 3 silver-armored soldiers looked at each other, then at the emperor of the underworld they were loyal to. Bai Qi fell into silence. After a while his eyebrows twitched. It was unknown what he thought of, but he looked at Jintai up and down and said, Jintai, you are actually a gold spirit. This is really surprising. Could it be that your physical body is made of gold? If that is the case, then you will be invincible? You have played with so many women. If you take Ji Wu as your wife, can she help you reproduce? Hearing this, Jintai's face instantly changed. With a twisted expression he said sternly, Bai Qi, I am talking to you about serious matters. If it wasn't for the fact that he was afraid of being discovered, he would have shouted it out loud. Don't misunderstand, I am talking about serious matters. Bai Qi continued to ask in a curious tone. As far as I know, there are 5 great spirits in this world. Since you are a gold spirit, then there should be other spirits. Do you not have a way to contact them for help? Bai Qi, you still dare to mention oh. Jintai's angry face froze. Suddenly he clenched his fists and said, how could I forget about him? If we can find him for help, we might be able to solve the problem. Oh, is he also one of the 5 great spirits? Bai Qi's eyes lit up. The 3 silver-armored soldiers' eyes also lit up when they heard that there was hope to solve the problem. Jintai squinted his eyes and said, that old thing always appears and disappears mysteriously. But he is indeed a capable person. At least he is stronger than me. It is just that he is used to staying aloof from worldly affairs. I don't know if we can find him. Saying this, he suddenly turned around and said, let's go. We will return to the immortal world, and go to the ancient forest of Wood Immortal Province. Maybe we can find him there. Okay. Bai Qi nodded. The silver-armored soldiers was startled. He quickly cupped his fists and said in a low voice, Emperor of the Underworld, we have contacted Zhang Jun. The Purgatory army was attacked by a large number of people. Now they are all dead. Zhang Jun led a few of his subordinates to escape and found a chance to send a message to us. He asked where to meet us. Should we ask him to go directly to the immortal world? Bai Qi slowly turned around and looked at his 3 subordinates. He tightly pursed his lips for a while. Then he secretly took out a crystal-clear ice talisman and stuffed it into the silver-armored soldier's hands. He transmitted his voice to the 3 silver-armored soldiers at the same time. I don't know what will happen if I go there. If there is trouble, it is not difficult for me to escape with my cultivation. But it is too dangerous for you to go with me. Remember what I said. Change your appearances and sneak to the Great Snow Mountain. Let Zhang Jun meet you there. Chapter 1107. In the rocky stream, there was no moonlight, but there was a cool breeze. Jin Taiwei glanced at them and guessed that they wanted to go their separate ways. With the current situation, this was not something he wanted to see. If he brought a few more people with him, they would be able to block the enemy at a critical moment. This was especially true for Bai Qi's loyal and brave subordinates, who were willing to sacrifice themselves to block the enemy at a critical moment. Even if they couldn't block the enemy, it would still be good if they could delay the enemy for a while. Bai Qi, take Qianjun and the others with you. We can take care of each other. Jintai interrupted with ulterior motives. Bai Qi glanced at him coldly and continued to transmit his voice to his 3 subordinates. The Snow Empress and her husband owe me a favor, and I trust their characters. Therefore, I've been saving this favor as a backup plan, and I haven't told anyone, and I haven't let anyone know about it. I'm preparing to use it at a critical moment. Now the situation is not in our favor. I vaguely feel that this matter is a bit sudden. There are too many factors involved in it. This matter should not be so simple. I am afraid that it will not end well. You have followed me for many years. Unfortunately, I have nothing left for you. I only hope that I can protect you as much as possible. After you reach the Great Snow Mountain, take out this ice talisman and ask for protection. The Snow Empress and her husband will arrange a place for you. Although the cultivation of the Snow Empress and her husband is not very strong, they have the Great Snow Mountain to rely on. Not many people have the ability to break into the Great Snow Mountain. and make things difficult for them. Unless someone can destroy the great snow mountain that has existed for countless years, even if the Snow Empress and her husband are no match for them, they should have no problem to hide. In addition, they have 800,000 Ice Soul Profound soldiers under their command. With their protection, you should be very safe in the Great Snow Mountain. Seeing that they were eager to express their opinions, Bai Qi raised his hand to stop them. Don't say anything else. Listen to my arrangements. Now that they've revealed all their trump cards, I'm already prepared. At the very least, there isn't anyone in the 3 realms that can stop me if I want to flee. I'm just going to see if there's any room to turn the situation around. If it's possible, I'll naturally summon all of you to help me. If it doesn't work, I won't go to my death. I'll go to the Great Snow Mountain to look for you. That's settled. You can go. Waving his hand at the 3 of them, he resolutely turned around and snorted at Kim Tae, whose eyes were flickering with uncertainty. Let's go. The Silver Armor Army, the Purple Armor Army, and the Blue Armor Army all knelt down on one knee in unison. They tried their best to suppress their excitement as they saluted. Farewell, Underworld Emperor. When they raised their heads again, the figure in front of them had already disappeared, and 2 flowing lights, one gold and one white, disappeared on the horizon. A flying shuttle was flying toward the Minghuang Mountain at a moderate speed. Along the way, they would occasionally bump into large groups or small groups of people chasing and killing each other, making them feel that the netherworld was already in chaos. Nie Xiaoqian and the others didn't want to encounter any trouble on the way, so they had already changed their conspicuous golden robes. The flying shuttle didn't dare to fly too fast. Firstly, it was afraid of attracting too much attention. Secondly, Nie Xiaoqian and the others were constantly observing their surroundings. Because they didn't know Kim Tae's exact location, they couldn't communicate with him through voice transmissions, so they could only rely on their eyesight to carefully search for him. None of this had anything to do with Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was still using his old habits, sitting at the back of the group and thinking about his own matters. In the end, she actually walked to the back of the group and sat next to Yu Qianqiu. However, what made him depressed was that Qingyang kept glancing at him from time to time. What was even more excessive was that she didn't seem to enjoy looking at him from afar. In the end, she leisurely walked to the back and bent down to sit next to Yu Qianqiu. This immediately attracted everyone's attention. From time to time, everyone would glance behind them. This was because everyone who knew Qingyang knew that this woman didn't care about ordinary men at all, let alone sitting next to a stranger. In this way, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. From time to time, they would look back, because those who knew Qingyang all knew that this woman didn't care about ordinary men at all, let alone a stranger who was sitting shoulder to shoulder with her. Especially Nie Xiaoqian's eyes, which were unscrupulously looking back and forth between the 2 of them, were full of suspicion. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on pins and needles, had a vague feeling that Qingyang might have recognized him, but for some reason, she couldn't be sure. After all, the 2 of them had been dancing together for a few days. Not only were they very familiar with each other's body shape, eyes and ears, they could even recognize each other's body odor. After thinking this through, Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly. Since he had already started, he decided to just go with the flow. He moved his body to the side, not letting Qingyang see his face, and lied down, pretending to sleep. In the end, he really did fall asleep. His dreams were filled with scenes of him and Qingyang dancing naked in the Green Pear Palace and being scolded by her. After an unknown amount of time, the speed of the flying shuttle suddenly decreased. Yu Qianqiu immediately woke up from his muddle-headedness. Hearing the sounds of fierce fighting, he immediately sat up. Nie Xiaoqian quickly walked forward and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" Gao, who was driving the flying shuttle, pointed forward and said, "There are thousands of people fighting in front of us. Should we go around them?" Everyone looked over and saw a wide canyon between 2 towering mountains in front of them. Thousands of people were fighting in the canyon. The group that had the advantage in numbers looked like the Netherworld's Dark Nether Army from their clothes. The battle looked more like a siege battle between the Dark Nether Army and the Dark Nether Army. Let's avoid the Dark Nether Army as much as possible. Nie Xiaoqian thought for a moment, then waved her hand and pointed at the towering mountain on the left, saying, Go around the mountain on the left. Ngao obeyed and quickly drove the flying shuttle to the mountain on the left. When the battle in the canyon disappeared from everyone's sight, the flying shuttle had just gone around the back of the mountain and was about to speed up, but suddenly, a streak of light flew over from the mountain and blocked the flying shuttle's path. The flying shuttle abruptly stopped. A woman in black with shoulder-length hair and half her face covered by a veil was blocking the way. Her deep gaze swept across everyone, causing everyone to become vigilant. Yu Qianqiu also quickly stood up. However, the people in front of him blocked his line of sight, so he naturally stepped on the horizontal board at the end of the shuttle that he had just been sitting on. He raised his head to take a look, but unexpectedly, his eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. His head shrank back, and he quickly sat back down. Qingyang, who was sitting next to him, frowned and stared at the place where he had just stepped on. It seemed that she was not used to his country bumpkin style. The black-clothed woman in front of them looked at Nie Xiaoqian's face and said indifferently, "So it's the Immortal Palace's chief steward Nie. Long time no see." Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nie Xiaoqian. Nie Xiaoqian was slightly startled and seemed to remember something. She quickly cupped her hands in surprise and said, "So it's the Saintess. Saintess, why are you here?" Based on everyone's experience, they immediately guessed that the person who had just arrived was the mysterious woman that the Underworld Emperor Bai Qi had called the Saintess of the Underworld. They couldn't help but look at her with great surprise. Qingyang was also curious to see what this legendary Saintess of the Underworld looked like. However, when she tilted her head slightly, she found that Yu Qianqiu was sitting motionlessly like an old monk in meditation. She suppressed the urge to stand up and take a look. Most of the people present had never seen the Saintess of the Underworld before, so it was not strange that they didn't recognize her. However, when Nie Xiaoqian followed Jin Tai to fight the Myriad Swords demon monarch in the human world, she had seen the Saintess of the Underworld several times. She had seen the Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and the Underworld Emperor Bai Qi treat this mysterious woman with respect. With Jin Tai's arrogant attitude, even he had to be respectful, so she naturally didn't dare to be disrespectful. The Saintess quietly replied, "I will wait here for the Underworld Emperor's arrival." Her gaze swept across everyone's faces as if she was examining something. Everyone looked at each other, but Nie Xiaoqian revealed a joyful expression and said, "Saintess, you mean to say that the Underworld Emperor will pass by this place?" The reason for her happiness was very simple. With the situation at this point, the Underworld Emperor and the Immortal Emperor would definitely be together. If the Underworld Emperor came, then the Immortal Emperor would naturally come as well. The Saintess didn't reply to her. Instead, she lightly approached the flying shuttle and floated to the side of the flying shuttle. She looked at everyone with a scrutinizing gaze. Just as she was feeling a little disappointed, she suddenly saw a man and a woman nestled at the back of the flying shuttle. The woman was curiously looking at her while the man was sneaking glances at her from time to time like a thief, as if he was afraid of her approaching. The Saintess' gaze paused on Yu Qianqiu's face for a moment, then she looked at everyone again. In the end, she didn't find the person she was looking for. Just as she was about to turn around and leave with a strange frown, she suddenly exclaimed in surprise. She abruptly turned around and looked at Yu Qianqiu again. Her eyes slightly emitted a strange black splendor, and her pair of eyes seemed to become even more profound. "Bitch, have you never seen a man before?" Yu Qianqiu looked down at the floor and cursed in his heart. The black splendor in the Saintess' eyes suddenly disappeared. She looked at Yu Qianqiu in a daze, and no one knew what she was thinking. No one else knew, but her mouth slightly formed a circle under the black veil. Everyone's gaze kept moving between her and Yu Qianqiu. They didn't know what the Saintess was trying to do. Only the great bright wheel's heart began to race. After the Saintess' misty eyes returned to normal, she lightly floated to the back of the flying shuttle. Yu Qianqiu, who had his head lowered, suddenly noticed that there was a pair of black boots in front of him. Moreover, it was the style of a woman. He couldn't help but slowly raise his head, and his eyes met with the slightly lowered head of the Saintess. Yu Qianqiu's expression stiffened. He coughed and pretended to casually tilt his head to the left. However, he discovered that Qingyang was staring at him with wide eyes. It was obvious that he was looking in the wrong direction. Thus, he coughed again and tilted his head to the right, pretending to look at the pitch-black scenery outside. Chapter 1108. However, to everyone's surprise, the Netherworld Saintess raised her leg and gently nudged his leg, indicating for him to sit a little further in. Yu Qianqiu raised his head in surprise and obediently moved his butt in. As a result, he bumped into Qingyang's butt. The Netherworld Saintess' name caused Qingyang to cooperate and move her butt further out. Finally, there was a small empty space at the end of the shuttle, and the Netherworld Saintess sat down without any hesitation. What did it mean to be on pins and needles? Yu Qianqiu now had another understanding of the situation. The situation was like this. There were 3 people in the small space, and 2 women were sandwiching a man in the middle. In fact, the 2 women knew him, and he also knew the 2 women. However, he had changed his appearance and wanted to pretend that he didn't know the 2 women. However, the 2 women seemed to recognize him, and he had to pretend that he didn't know them. Thus, the 2 women began to push him left and right. There was also a group of people watching the show with surprised expressions. They thought that he had done something to the 2 women, but in fact, he hadn't done anything to them. Nie Xiaoqian and the others looked at the 3 people in the back with suspicious eyes. They couldn't figure out what the 3 people were doing. Could it be that there was a place with good feng shui behind them? Or could it be that Niu Yud's charm was limitless, and women fell in love at first sight? Even if it was a place with good feng shui, even if Niu Yud's charm was limitless, there was no need to do this in front of everyone, right? Yu Qianqiu straightened his back and sat there motionlessly. At this moment, he couldn't find even the slightest bit of feeling like he was hugging a woman on his left and right. There were still faint sounds of fighting coming from the canyon on the other side of the mountain. But aside from the sound of the wind, it was eerily quiet here. Under everyone's gaze, Yu Qianqiu swallowed with difficulty. Just as he was about to stand up, a hand suddenly reached out from his right and stopped him from getting up. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and saw that the Underworld Saintess was looking at him with a profound gaze. He immediately confirmed that the other party had recognized him. Hence, his shoulders and waist slumped as he shamelessly sat between the 2 women. Who's afraid of who? After a while, Nie Xiaoqian walked through the crowd and came to the back. She cupped her hands to the Saintess of the Underworld and asked, "Saintess, are you going to wait here for the Underworld Emperor?" The Netherworld Saintess nodded slightly and didn't say anything. Nie Xiaoqian said, "I understand." She looked at her daughter again and didn't know what she was doing. She then turned around and gave the others a look. Everyone turned around and didn't want to watch anymore. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt the pressure on him lessen significantly. He tilted his head to look at the Netherworld Saintess and transmitted his voice respectfully. "Saintess, what is your intention in doing this?" The Saintess of the Underworld also tilted her head to look at him and sent him a telepathic message. "Yu Qianqiu, you are so capricious. You were dressed like a barbarian before. I almost didn't recognize you. I almost let you go for nothing." Yu Qianqiu refused to admit his mistake. "Saintess, have you mistaken me for someone else? My name is Niu Yud, not Yu Qianqiu." The Underworld Saintess blinked her eyes and said, "You can hide it from others, but how can you hide it from me? You should know that I am proficient in divination and can see many things that others can't. How can your little tricks fool my eyes? Do you want me to expose your true colors in front of everyone? Hee. No wonder you are the Saintess of the Underworld. I can't fool you." Yu Qianqiu snorted. He was a little displeased by the other party's belittling and threatening words. It's not a big deal to be proficient in divination. Take me for example. Although I am also proficient in divination, I always keep a low profile and never show it off in front of others. I think it's meaningless to do so. To put it bluntly, it's just vulgar. Oh, from what you said, it seems that you are also proficient in divination. I really can't see it. If there is a chance, I want to see it. The Saintess of the Underworld's tone was somewhat sarcastic. Yu Qianqiu had set a trap for her to fall into. He expected that she would say this, so he asked, "If you really want to see it, I can show you a few of my skills since there is nothing to do now. I'm just afraid that it will scare you." "Scare me? Not to that extent. I will wait and see. The saintess of the underworld looked around as if she wanted to choose someone for Yu Qianqiu to read their fortune. Unexpectedly, she found that her hand was grabbed by someone. She looked back coldly and saw Yu Qianqiu rubbing one of her hands. He even had a greasy smile on his face, revealing a very wretched look. She had never been treated so disrespectfully before. She immediately said in a cold tone, "Are you courting death?" Qingyang, who had been silently observing the actions of the two, was stunned. From their expressions, she could tell that the two of them seemed to be conversing with each other through voice transmissions. She never would have thought that the fellow beside her would actually do something like profaning the underworld saintess. She could already see the murderous intent in the underworld saintess' eyes, but the fellow was still smiling shamelessly. "Didn't you want to see my divination skills? It's best to use you to verify it. You should know whether or not your divination is accurate. Otherwise, you will say that I am talking nonsense. Why are you looking at me like that? If you don't want to, just say it. However, I will say this in advance. You were the one who went back on your words, not me." Yu Qianqiu spoke righteously, but there was a lewd smile on his face, purposely trying to disgust the other party. He was overjoyed in his heart and sighed inwardly. Dealing with this kind of woman who was used to being high and mighty. If you don't suppress the east wind, her west wind will suppress your east wind. You can't always be nice to her. When it's time to take care of her, you have to take care of her. Don't be fooled by his complacent appearance. In fact, he knew his own capabilities best. If he hadn't gone to the all-heavens boundary and learned some secrets, he wouldn't have dared to bully the underworld saintess like this. Even if he was given 100 times more courage, he wouldn't have dared to do so. However, the underworld saintess thought that Yu Qianqiu was deliberately advancing in order to retreat. If she refused now, the other party would naturally take advantage of her. Even if she took care of him, he would still be in the right. Thus, she resisted the urge to slap Yu Qianqiu to death. She clenched her teeth and transmitted her voice. "Is there anyone who divines like you?" Yu Qianqiu grabbed her hand, which was gradually becoming a little tense, and continued to touch her wrist. As he touched it, he laughed shamelessly and said, "To think that you are proficient in the art of divination. There are tens of thousands of techniques that you need to know, and they all return to the origin. Could it be that you don't know that there is a technique in the art of divination called bone feeling? A person's fate is, in fact, predestined in the unseen world. Then how can it be reflected? It is reflected in a person's bone texture." The saintess was slightly stunned by his words. Although she didn't know how to touch bones, she was, after all, proficient in this field. Not only did Yu Qianqiu's words make sense, but some of them were indeed reasonable in the art of divination. It didn't seem like he was talking nonsense. However, the lewd smile on his face, which was like that of a prostitute, was really unbearable. The most hateful thing was that his so-called bone touching, no matter how she looked at it, seemed like he was molesting a good woman. "After touching for so long, what did you find?" The saintess's tone was so gloomy that ice water could be wrung out of it. She suddenly withdrew her hand and subconsciously looked at the people standing in front of her, afraid that they would see her. Fortunately, everyone was facing forward to show respect to her, the saintess of the underworld. Only the woman at the side was stunned. Little did she know, if everyone was watching, Yu Qianqiu might not have dared to do this. Of course, this guy couldn't be judged by common sense. Perhaps he would dare to do such a despicable thing in front of everyone. In reality, he was thick-skinned and black-hearted. There was nothing he didn't dare to do. Everything depended on the situation. "I only touched for so long, and I only touch one palm. What can I find?" Yu Qianqiu complained weakly. The saintess suddenly looked over and said with a cold and stern voice, "Then, how much longer do you want to touch? Where else do you want to touch? If you can't say anything, believe it or not, I will immediately chop off your hands." "What a joke! I will let you see my divine foresight." Yu Qianqiu chuckled in his heart, but his expression turned solemn as he replied, "Since that's the case, then I'll have to embarrass myself. If I've miscalculated in any way, please forgive me." "You want me to forgive you if you are wrong?" The saintess of the underworld was instantly angry. She gnashed her teeth and emphasized word by word. If you are wrong, I will chop off your dog hands. I will try my best. Yu Qianqiu pretended to touch his chin and rolled his eyes as he pondered. Then he explained seriously, from the bone pattern on your palm and your current identity, the Emperor of the Underworld, by Qi, is the supreme master of the Underworld, but he regards you as the saintess of the Underworld, and will probably listen to everything you say. Therefore, you have a faint air of the Overlord of the Underworld. If I am not wrong, there should be a word, Overlord, in your name. Am I right? The saintess of the Underworld trembled all over. She looked at Yu Qianqiu in a daze. After a moment of silence, she didn't say whether Yu Qianqiu was right or not. She just gnashed her teeth and said, "Continue to calculate." Yu Qianqiu wasn't in a hurry to force her to give him an answer. Jiang Hu's game was a psychological tactic, so he could take it slowly. He rubbed his chin and began to shake his head and roll his eyes. From the bone pattern on your palm and my calculation, ordinary experts who are proficient in divination know that the mysteries of heaven can't be revealed. But you are doing the opposite, forcing me to tell you the result of touching the bone. In fact, this already contains a certain principle of fate. You want me to tell you the result of my calculation. What does it mean? It means that you want me to announce it to the public. Then what I am doing to you now can only be summed up in one word, which is announce. It means that I am now revealing the mystery to you. So there must be a word announce in your name. Am I right? Chapter 1109. Was there a need to ask? Even if he didn't touch her hand and didn't deliberately disgust her, he was sure that he was right. However, the underworld saintess didn't think so. Ever since she walked out of the all heavens boundary, she hadn't told anyone her name. It had been so long that she had almost forgotten what her name was. It was even more impossible for people outside the all heavens boundary to know her name. If it was a coincidence that Yu Qianqiu got one word right, then why did he get 2 words right in a row? What convinced her most was that Yu Qianqiu's calculation was reasonable and convincing, and it didn't seem like a blind guess at all. Most importantly, Yu Qianqiu's calculations were correct. Her name really did have the characters Tai and Xian in it. This was definitely not something that could be found through simple guesses and guesses. Although she was proficient in the art of divination, she was frankly shocked, very shocked. She never dreamed that Yu Qianqiu would have this skill. Not only did she look at him in a new light, but she also suddenly felt that this Yu Qianqiu was somewhat unfathomable. Thinking that she couldn't see through his fate, it was naturally not surprising that he had some hidden skills. Therefore, she was even more certain that he was the person she was looking for. How could she know that Yu Qianqiu had mingled with people from all walks of life in his previous life? What kind of tricks had he not seen? It was as easy as a knife cutting tofu to fool a person with little experience like her. Especially with his eloquence. Even a veteran of the Jianghu would inevitably fall for it. Seeing that the other party was shocked by his fortune-telling skill and couldn't speak for a long time, looking at him with extremely complicated emotions, Yu Qianqiu immediately squeezed out an unfathomable smile, but his eyes were maliciously glancing from her face to her chest, wondering which place to touch next. What else? The underworld saintess suppressed her emotions and asked. Yu Qianqiu recovered from his imagination and casually said, "Your name is 3 words. Why do you say that?" Her tone was no longer as harsh as before. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to display the divine quintessence of blind fortune-telling that he learned in his previous life, he realized that something was amiss. His eyeballs immediately drooped down and he said helplessly, "Do you think I'm an idiot? Was there even a need to calculate this? You've already said that there's more. Since there's more, it's naturally 3 words. It seems like there are quite a few people with 4-character names, right?" The netherworld saintess sneered. Yu Qianqiu realized that he couldn't justify himself. He immediately took out his special skill of fortune-telling for the saintess of the underworld and changed the topic. From the bone texture on your palm and my calculation, your name is 3 words. Am I right? The underworld saintess was shocked by his words again. She was stunned for a moment and then asked, "Since you said it's 3 words, why don't you calculate the word in the middle?" She was like a dead duck that was asking for trouble. She refused to admit that Yu Qianqiu's calculation was correct. She had no one to blame but herself for being tricked. Earlier, I had only touched it for a short period of time, so I did not manage to get a clear grasp of it. I was only able to calculate out 2 characters. If you let me touch it again, I should be able to calculate it out, Yu Qianqiu said, appearing somewhat troubled. This person. His curiosity mustn't be aroused. Otherwise, if he was seduced halfway, how would he be able to deal with it so easily? The netherworld saintess bit her red lips under her veil. She took the initiative to bring the hand that was touched to Yu Qianqiu. The fingers were slender and the skin was snow-white. They actually trembled slightly. Embarrassed, Yu Qianqiu grabbed them and touched them repeatedly. The netherworld saintess actually took the initiative to let this guy touch her hand? Qingyang, who was silently observing the two's actions, opened her mouth slightly. Her face was filled with disbelief. She now had 10,000 reasons to believe that this man and woman must have been together for a long time. The so-called blind man naturally had his own way of fortune-telling. Otherwise, how could he make a living? Yu Qianqiu touched her hand, and his heart bloomed with joy. He couldn't help but think back to the time when he found the same blind man to read his fortune for 3 consecutive days. He remembered that the blind man was really blind. He was so eloquent that he almost fooled a veteran in the pugilistic world. Later on, he kept an eye out and changed his identity to find the blind man to read his fortune for 3 consecutive days. In the end, the blind man told 3 different fortunes in 3 days. Furthermore, each time he felt like he was convinced. He was too good at fooling people. Who would have thought that he wasn't angry? Instead, he was shocked. He directly invited the blind man back with a high salary. He was given good food and drinks, and a few beauties served him. In the end, the blind man didn't disappoint him. He was loyal and devoted. At the crucial moment, he would appear and perform miraculous deeds for him. He became his right-hand man. After he died, Yu Qianqiu didn't know how the blind man was doing. He missed him so much. After touching her hand for a while, he thought that with the previous deceit as a foundation, it was time to let the other party know his abilities. He rolled his eyes and said with certainty, "Uncle, there's one more word that is uncle. Your full name is Taishu Xian." His black eyeballs drooped down as he stared at the other party and asked, "Am I right?" Although he asked, his face was filled with great confidence in his bone-touching divination art. Actually, when she had calculated the first 2 words, she was already mentally prepared. When she heard that her full name was really out, the netherworld saintess was very calm this time. She slowly pulled her hand back and said coldly, "The bull's head doesn't match the horse's mouth. Not a single word is correct. This is not my name at all. Your so-called mastery of divination is only SOSO. Impossible." Yu Qianqiu denied it on the spot, cursing the dead duck's stubbornness in his heart. Then he used his voice to refute. "My fortune-telling art has never failed before. Forget a name. If it weren't for the fact that you're a woman, I would have even divined the names of 8 generations of your ancestors for you. I would have even divined the fate of your past life." The netherworld saintess was stunned. She admitted that she didn't have the ability to calculate the names of other people's 8 generations of ancestors, but she didn't think that Yu Qianqiu was bragging. She just asked with a voice transmission with a puzzled look in her eyes, "What does this have to do with whether I'm a woman or not?" Yu Qianqiu's gaze stopped at her chest. He coldly snorted and said, "If you weren't a woman, I would be able to feel your father's name from your left sternum, and your mother's name from your right sternum. If I felt your entire body, you wouldn't be able to hide your fate from me even if you wanted to. You are a woman and I am a man. How can I touch your body so casually?" The expression under the black veil twitched. She clenched her teeth and remained silent for a long time. Then she said the word shameless. She didn't say anything else, which made Yu Qianqiu's evil intentions fail. Yu Qianqiu was a well-educated man, so he wouldn't force himself to touch her. However, there was a puzzled look on his face. He didn't know why this netherworld saintess wanted to sit next to him. Was it just because she recognized him? The fighting noises in the valley gradually disappeared. Then there was the sound of a large number of people flying away. The surroundings suddenly fell into a dead silence. A few hours later, Two beams of light flew over the two people's heads at an incredible speed. By the time they realized what was going on, the two beams of light had returned. Obviously, they had discovered them. Jintai and Baiqi appeared not far from the flying shuttle. Everyone was overjoyed and bowed. Greetings, Immortal Emperor, greetings, Emperor of the Underworld. Qingyang also stood up and bowed. Only the Netherworld Saintess and Yu Qianqiu remained motionless. Now that the World Commerce Association of Yu Qianqiu had collapsed and his subordinates had left the immortal realm, he didn't have to worry about being restrained. He didn't care if they were the Immortal Emperor or the Emperor of the Underworld. Jintai and Baiqi looked at the two motionless people and glanced at each other. Then, they landed on the flying shuttle and politely cupped their hands towards the Netherworld Saintess. Baiqi bitterly smiled and said, I heard from Qianjun that the Saintess had secretly left the Underworld Royal Palace a few days before the war broke out. It seems that the Saintess had already predicted this calamity. Jintai indifferently snorted and said, So what if she predicted it? Didn't your Underworld Royal Palace still perish? He was clearly unhappy that the Netherworld Saintess didn't warn him in advance. The might of the heavens is hard to predict. No one can see the trend of the heavenly Tao. Who can go against the trend of the heavens? They can only go with the flow. If it wasn't for this, why would I be trapped in the mortal world for 100,000 years? The Netherworld Saintess glanced at the two and said, Under the might of the heavens, I am like a small boat in a raging river. I can't stop anything. It is already not bad that I could reach the shore in the midst of the raging waves. Jintai coldly snorted. If the might of the heavens is hard to predict, then why did the Saintess avoid the disaster in advance? If I could predict the movement of the might of the heavens, then I would be the heavenly Tao. I just happened to avoid this disaster, because I wanted to find someone. This is fate. The Netherworld Saintess lightly waved her hand and said, If I didn't deliberately delay here for a while, I'm afraid the two of you would have already encountered Wang Qing. There's no point in reasoning with people like you. Jintai flew into a rage, but Baiqi quickly blocked him. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting together with the Netherworld Saintess, he was slightly surprised. He squinted his eyes and asked, This friend's face is covered with something. It seems like he doesn't want to show his face. I wonder if he is an old acquaintance of Baiqi? Jintai immediately looked over and coldly snorted. Hiding your head and hiding your tail. One look and I can tell that you are hiding something. The others were slightly shocked as they looked at Yu Qianqiu. They didn't have Jintai and Baiqi's microscopic vision that could see through the human skin mask. Qingyang's expression shook. Her eyes flickered as she stared at Yu Qianqiu. She was more and more convinced of her guess. De Mingluan quickly came out and cupped his hands at Jintai. Immortal Emperor, please calm your anger. This person was sent by an old friend of mine to inform this subordinate. It was precisely because of his timely report that this subordinate was saved from danger. Jintai glanced at the others. Seeing Nie Shaoqian nod in agreement, he shouted, Then let him take off his mask. Yu Qianqiu was just about to take De Mingluan and leave when the Netherworld Saintess quietly said, He is my subordinate. I don't think he needs to listen to you, right? Chapter 11:10. The Great Mingluan, who had received Yu Qianqiu's secret message, also felt that it was inappropriate to stay here for Yu Qianqiu's safety. However, when he heard the Underworld Saintess's words, he felt that there was still a chance, so he asked Yu Qianqiu to wait for an opportunity. Jintai raised his sword-like eyebrows and stared at the Underworld Saintess with a murderous look. You shameless bitch! Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you? Baiqi frowned slightly. He stood in front of Jintai and said sternly, Jintai, what do you want to do? Now is not the time to have internal strife. You want to have internal strife just because I killed her? Jintai stared at Baiqi coldly and snorted. Are you going to fall out with me because of her? Baiqi, so what if you have served this bitch for so many years? So what if I have always been respectful to her? Your Underworld Royal Palace and my Immortal Palace will collapse just like that. What's the use of keeping this bitch? In one sentence, he revealed the reason why he was respectful to her. I have never expected you to be respectful to others from the bottom of your heart. I am not surprised that you have said this. The underworld saintess slowly stood up and turned to look at the distant night sky. She gave people a feeling of emptiness and said lightly, "If I am not wrong, you should want to go to the immortal world to find someone to help you out of your predicament, Jintai. If you dare to touch me, I won't say that you can't find the person you are looking for, but at least I will make you die without a burial place." "Just you?" Jintai snorted disdainfully, but his eyes slightly glanced at Bai Qi. He saw that Bai Qi was looking at the underworld saintess with a surprised expression. It seemed that he did not secretly reveal to the underworld saintess that he was going to the immortal world's ancient forest. Jintai was secretly shocked and dispelled the idea of being too presumptuous. The underworld saintess tilted her head and looked at him, and said indifferently, "You can try and touch me. Okay. We should be in the same boat at this time. Don't quarrel over such a small matter." It could be said that Bai Qi understood Jintai better, so he quickly spoke up to be the peacemaker. Jintai just coldly snorted and followed Bai Qi's way down the slope, not mentioning the matter of Yu Qianqiu again. The others remained silent and didn't say anything. Bai Qi glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was still sitting motionlessly. He didn't see any part of him that looked like a subordinate of the underworld saintess. He turned to Nie Xiaoqian and said, "You drive the flying shuttle to the ancient forest in the immortal world." An ancient forest in the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu, who had been maintaining his vigilance, was startled. He immediately thought of the person that Wei Chuanqiu had mentioned from the underworld saintess words. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, could it be that Bai Qi and Jintai are looking for Wei Chuanqiu's grandfather to come out and help? Thinking of this, he immediately had the intention to follow and see what was going on. He was not in a hurry to leave. Nie Xiaoqian glanced at Jintai. Seeing that her master had no intention of objecting, she immediately said, "Yes." Taking over in Gao's role, the flying shuttle turned into a stream of light and flew away. No one on the flying shuttle spoke. The netherworld saintess tilted her head to look at Yu Qianqiu, who seemed to be thinking of something, and sat down next to him. It was not convenient for Qingyang to sit down in front of the immortal emperor, so the man and woman sitting at the back were no longer crowded. Bai Qi turned back to look at the two of them, but didn't say anything. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting next to the netherworld saintess, transmitted his voice and asked, "Who are they going to the ancient forest in the immortal world to find?" He wanted to confirm his guess. "I don't know." The netherworld saintess answered very straightforwardly. Yu Qianqiu choked for a while. "Didn't you calculate that they are going to the immortal world to find someone to help them get out of their predicament? I only roughly calculated some of their movements. If I can even calculate what they are going to do, or who they are looking for, then doesn't that mean I can control everyone's fate?" The netherworld saintess looked at him and asked, "Could it be that your bone-touching fortune-telling technique is so amazing?" Although she refused to openly admit that Yu Qianqiu had the ability to tell fortunes, her words undoubtedly showed that she really believed him. Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment, his gaze landing on her face that was half covered by a black veil. He was very curious about what the face behind the black veil looked like. Blinking his eyes, he shamelessly replied, "Of course. If you let me carefully touch your face, I'll be able to calculate who you're looking for and what you're doing." In his heart, he added, "I've long since calculated that you want to find the devil god for revenge." He was making irresponsible remarks, but the netherworld saintess was frightened by his accurate name. Her eyes flashed as she looked at Bai Qi and Jintai, and she changed the topic. "Since you are so clever, why do you still ask me? Why don't you just calculate for them and find out who they are looking for?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said in confusion, "I say, Taishu Xian, do you think Jintai and Bai Qi will let me touch their faces?" "My name is not Taishu Xian. You are wrong." The netherworld saintess said this and didn't say anything, so Yu Qianqiu's fortune-telling magic was stuck in his mouth and couldn't be used, after crossing the underworld and entering the immortal world, because they had to avoid as many people as possible, and at the same time, they had to hide. So even though Nie Xiaoqian personally drove the flying shuttle at an extremely fast speed, it still took them half a month to finally enter a vast forest, which was their destination. Finally, They arrived at the ancient forest of the Wood Fairy province. Although they were still at the periphery of the ancient forest, they could see towering trees everywhere. The forest was dark, and the sporadic light from the sunlight dotted the surroundings. The old trees and vines were entangled, and the ground was covered with thick rotten leaves. You could hear the rustling sound when you stepped on it. The 11 people quickly looked around, and they all knew that there were countless plant spirits in this ancient forest. Finally, their eyes all focused on Jin Tai. Except for Yu Qianqiu, who could guess most of it, no one else knew who Jin Tai was looking for. Jin Tai, where is the person you were talking about? Bai Qi asked, floating 1 foot above the ground. His bare feet obviously didn't want to step on the rotten leaves on the ground. He should be in this ancient forest. Jin Tai's eyes flickered as he looked into the depths of the forest. Then he asked Nie Xiaoqian to give him 10 jade talismans. Holding them together in his palm, 10 faint golden light flowed out of his palm and seeped into the 10 jade talismans. He then gently waved his hand, and the 10 jade talismans flew in front of the 10 people. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what Jin Tai was doing. One by one, they grabbed the jade talismans in front of them. Bai Qi stretched out 2 slender fingers and held the jade talismans in front of him. He repeatedly checked the jade talismans in front of him and frowned. Jin Tai, what do you mean by this? Jin Tai waved his arm and pointed around, and said arrogantly, everyone split up and search in the ancient forest. If you see an old guy with a wooden staff, he should be the person we are looking for. Immediately crush the communication talisman in your hand to summon me. Nie Xiaoqian and the other Immortal Palace remnants paused for a moment, but they still saluted in unison. Yes, Immortal Emperor. Bai Qi looked at Jin Tai and his expression twitched a little. He said in a deep voice, Jin Tai, are you kidding me? You don't even know where the person is and you brought me here? The entire ancient forest is so big. Trying to find a person here aimlessly is like looking for a needle in a haystack. How do you want us to find him? Jin Tai immediately looked at him and said indifferently, do you have a better way? At least it's better than your stupid way. Bai Qi looked around the depths of the forest coldly and said, there are many plants in this ancient forest. As long as you catch a few and ask them, you will naturally find the person you are looking for. Umph. Qin Tai coldly snorted and said, I don't know how many times I've used this clever method of yours, but it's completely useless. Even in the ancient forest, that old fellow's traces are elusive. Even if it's the grass demons that live here all year round, they at most know of the existence of such a person, but no one knows where he is. As soon as these words came out, everyone felt that it was even more difficult to find him. Bai Qi paused and suddenly revealed a ruthless expression. Desperate times call for desperate measures. We can't care so much anymore. Set fire to the forest, and we will be able to force him out. If he really can help us like you said, even if we make a big commotion and alarm our opponents, we don't have to be afraid. Set fire to the ancient forest? Jin Tai's slender eyes flashed and he said sarcastically, this is a good idea, but I'm afraid that even if we force him out, not only will he not help us, but he will also take both of our lives. Do you think that our current opponents are not strong enough? Hearing this, Bai Qi remembered that the person they were looking for was probably the wood spirit, one of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. Setting fire to the wood spirit's territory might really anger the wood spirit. Seeing that Bai Qi didn't say anything, Jin Tai glanced at the others and said, let's split up and search. We will have a higher chance of finding him. After saying that, he turned into a beam of light and flew into the depths of the forest, seeming to be a bit impatient. The remnants of the Immortal Palace obeyed and scattered in the dark forest. Before Qingyang left, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and wanted to say something, but she stopped for a while. She saw that Yu Qianqiu was holding the big bright wheel, and the Emperor of the Underworld and the Saintess of the Underworld were still there. She couldn't say anything, so she turned around and flew into the forest. Who knew that not long after she flew into the forest, her mother, Nie Xiaoqian, flashed to her side. Nie Xiaoqian was obviously worried about her inexperienced daughter risking her life in the ancient forest alone, so the two of them left together. In reality, everyone knew that the wood spirits in the ancient forest weren't just for show. There were many unknown dangers hidden in the depths of the forest. The 4 scattered commanders also coincidentally met up not far away. It wasn't that they didn't want to obey the immortal emperor's decree. It was just a coincidence. Thus, the 4 of them split into 2 groups, and the distance between the 2 groups wasn't too far. Big bright wheel. My cultivation level is low, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of me. Yu Qianqiu grabbed the big bright wheel's sleeve with a smile, and the big bright wheel nodded graciously. Just as the 2 of them were about to leave together, they heard the saintess of the underworld suddenly shout, "Niu Yud, you are my subordinate, so naturally, I will be the one to take care of you." She also flashed over. Bai Qi, who was floating barefoot, looked at the 3 of them and sneered. He indifferently interjected, "Jin Tai has already left. Do you 3 still want to put on an act in front of me? Yu Qianqiu, we haven't seen each other for a long time." Chapter 11:11. The 3 of them looked back at the same time. Yu Qianqiu showed a puzzled expression, looking at the underworld saintess, Taishu Xian, and then at the great bright wheel, but not at himself. Of course, it was inconvenient for him to look at himself, as he didn't seem to know who Yu Qianqiu was talking about. Bai Qi stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to be ignorant, and said with a faint smile, "Yu Qianqiu, do you really want me to tear off the mask on your face to see you?" The great bright wheel's expression changed slightly, but the underworld saintess, Taishu Xian, remained calm. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. With Bai Qi's cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult for him to see that he was wearing a mask, but he didn't believe that Bai Qi could see his face behind the mask. At most, he would be suspicious, and maybe he was trying to trick him. Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose and asked, "Is the Emperor of the Underworld calling me? My name is Niu Yud. How could the Emperor of the Underworld mistake me for Yu Qianqiu?" He wouldn't give up until he reached the Yellow River. "Mistake?" Bai Qi snorted, feeling somewhat unhappy, but he still maintained his gentlemanly demeanor, pointing at Yu Qianqiu and saying with a smile, "If you were standing in front of me alone, I probably wouldn't think that you were Yu Qianqiu. The Great Bright Will has a close relationship with the 2 Yao cultivators of the World Chamber of Commerce, so he must have a close relationship with you as well. As for the minor immortal cultivator, who could be favored by the saintess, I only heard her mention a fellow called Yu Qianqiu, and never heard her mention anyone else. Also, don't forget that we talked face to face in the Endless Cliffs. It's rare to see a minor immortal cultivator who needs my concentration to see their cultivation. It can't be that so many things happen at the same time, right? Yu Qianqiu, you can hide it from Lady Jean, but you can't hide it from me. I treated you with sincerity. Do you think it's necessary to hide it in front of me?" It turned out that there were so many flaws. It seemed like he had no choice but to admit it. Yu Qianqiu let out a bitter smile while rubbing his nose. He bowed to Bai Qi and said, "Emperor of the Underworld, please forgive me. I really had no choice. Yu Qianqiu knows his mistake." "It's good that you know your mistakes." Bai Qi glanced at the underworld saintess and easily forgave her. He smiled faintly and said, "Naturally, you have your reasons for hiding your true appearance. It has nothing to do with me, so I don't need to pursue it. But I think you don't want to see the Heartless Palace dominate the world. So we should try our best to find the person Jin Tai mentioned." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately dashed into the dense forest. As expected, he did not pursue Yu Qianqiu. It seemed like he was trying to be friendly. The remaining 3 looked at each other in the forest. De Mingluan was not familiar with the underworld saintess, so he did not know what to say. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a questioning gaze. Cuckoo. A few birds landed on the treetops, breaking the silence between the 3. Yu Qianqiu glanced around and looked at the underworld saintess with a toothache. He said helplessly, "Saintess, why are you following us instead of the Emperor of the Underworld? With our cultivation, we won't be able to protect you if we encounter danger." He also wanted to see what kind of person Luer's grandfather was, but he didn't want to bring this saintess along. Although he knew the background of this saintess, he didn't know what kind of person she was. If he got a woman with a venomous heart to stab him in the back, he would simply be finding trouble for himself. The underworld saintess Taishu Xian ignored Yu Qianqiu's words. Instead, she stared at de Mingluan and said, I have something to say to Yu Qianqiu alone. You should go further away. There doesn't seem to be anything to talk about between us. Yu Qianqiu's words were cut off by Taishu Xian's determined gaze. He scratched his nose and smiled bitterly at de Mingluan. Wait for me at a place 10 li ahead. De Mingluan nodded, cupped his fists at the underworld saintess, and quickly left. After watching de Mingluan leave, Yu Qianqiu looked at the woman in front of him, scratched his head, and said, Speak. What do you want from me? My original name is Taishu Xian. You didn't miscalculate. Taishu Xian looked at him and said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment. Looking around, there was no one around him. His eyes quickly turned as a series of thoughts flashed through his mind. Previously, he had been so stubborn, but now he was admitting it so easily. Not knowing what this woman wanted, he denied it immediately. Saintess, you misunderstand. I was just making it up. Don't take it seriously. You were able to guess my name just by making it up. Then I'll have to ask you to calculate it seriously. Taishu Xian didn't believe it at all. His name was considered rare, so how could it be made up so easily? She raised her hands to the back of her head, and the black sleeves on her arms slid down, revealing a pair of white arms. The black veil that had been covering her face was quietly taken off, revealing an exquisite and peerlessly beautiful face that even an angel would be ashamed of. She had a head full of black hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, and her snow-white skin was as smooth as jade. She was even more beautiful than Ji Wu. Her beauty was so shocking that it could stop the flow of time. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His gaze was deeply immersed in that peerlessly beautiful face, and he couldn't pull himself away. Didn't you say that as long as I let you carefully feel the bones of my face, you'll be able to calculate who I'm looking for or what I'm doing? Taishu Xian's pair of beautiful eyes stared at him. The meaning behind her words was very clear. She was clearly asking Yu Qianqiu to use his bone-touching fortune-telling technique again. In fact, the reason why she was pestering Yu Qianqiu was very simple. Naturally, it wasn't because she was attracted to Yu Qianqiu's masculinity. She understood that with her cultivation talent, she would never be able to match a terrifying existence like the devil god. However, she couldn't find anyone with that ability even after searching everywhere. On the contrary, when she talked about Yu Qianqiu with Bai Qi, she had a hint of understanding. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu and Bai Changchun, whose fate couldn't be seen clearly, were the people she was looking for? Although she couldn't be sure if it was those two people, she decided to start with Yu Qianqiu. Because Bai Changchun wasn't that easy to control, she decided to pester Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yu Qianqiu's bone-touching fortune-telling technique shocked her. Listening to his words and observing his actions, it seemed that he was much stronger than her innate talent. At first, she was a little resistant and didn't want to let Yu Qianqiu touch the secrets in the depths of her heart. However, after thinking about it, she was extremely happy. Since Yu Qianqiu was so good at fortune-telling, he might be able to calculate who could help her take revenge. Therefore, this scene happened. Looking at the beautiful face in front of him, Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He thought to himself, indeed, dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and mice give birth to children that know how to dig holes. No wonder she was the daughter of Ming, who could attract the devil god and the ancestor of all demons at the same time. The genes that she was born with couldn't be erased. From this, it could be seen how beautiful Ming was in the past. The beauty in front of him made Yu Qianqiu's fingers twitch. He rubbed his hands and smiled awkwardly. Since it's the order of the saintess, how can Yu Qianqiu dare to disobey? What he meant was, then I won't be polite. He pretended to be in a difficult position and strode over to her. Seeing him walking over, Taishu Xian's heart was also beating wildly. No man had ever touched her face. She bit her lips slightly and slowly closed her eyes. Yu Qianqiu, who was walking over, stretched out a finger to hook the beautiful jade-like jaw. A smile of success appeared on his face. In his mind, he was already thinking whether he should touch the soft and nice parts of the woman's body next. However, unfortunately, when he moved forward, A ray of sunlight shone through the shade of the trees and directly shone on his eyes. Disappointing. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to avoid the dazzling sunlight. When his finger almost touched the other's chin, he looked at the delicate and beautiful face with closed eyes and suddenly paused. In his mind, Grandma Yan's earnest expectation in the boundary formation of heavens appeared. He had promised Taishu Xian that he would tell Taishu Xian that Grandma Yan missed her very much. Did he really want to take advantage of her for a moment of pleasure? Yu Qianqiu's outstretched hand slowly dropped down, and the snicker on his face gradually disappeared. Regardless of whether he would offend Taishu Xian by doing this, at least he could have a good relationship with Grandma Yan in the boundary formation of heavens. Maybe she could help him in the future. How could he lose the big picture because of a small gain? Looking at Taishu Xian, who seemed to notice that something was wrong and was about to open her eyes, Yu Qianqiu took a step back and said with a wry smile, "Taishu Xian, Grandma Yan misses you very much." Grandma Yan? Taishu Xian was very moved. She opened her eyes and said with a pair of beautiful eyes, "This is also calculated by you?" "I don't count for anything." Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "I was just joking with you. I don't really know how to read fortunes. It's just that you haven't gone back to see Grandma Yan for so many years, so I'm just giving you a slight punishment." He first denied that he had taken advantage of Grandma Yan and said honestly, "I have entered the boundary formation of heavens and met Grandma Yan. I have heard Grandma Yan talk about you." "Impossible. How could you have passed through the boundary formation of heavens?" Taishu Xian shook his head repeatedly to express his disbelief. Without a choice, Yu Qianqiu could only roughly explain the matter of him meeting Grandma Yan. However, he excluded the matter of finding by Changchun and Xinyu being able to enter and exit the boundary formation of heavens at will. After all, he didn't know Taishu Xian's character very well, so he didn't dare to reveal anything. Looking at Taishu Xian's expression, which showed that he had already believed him, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "Taishu Xian, it's easier said than done to deal with the demonic god. Currently, the immortal realm and the netherworld are already in chaos. Although your cultivation is higher than mine, I'm afraid it's not enough to guarantee your own safety. You'd better go back. Grandma Yan really misses you." "Go back," Taishu Xian muttered to himself in a daze. "If I don't take revenge for my parents, how can I calm down and stay there? I have already conveyed Grandma Yan's words. It's up to you whether you want to go back or not. I can't force you. If you want to go back, just let me know. I will find a way to send you back. Think about it yourself." Yu Qianqiu looked at her, who was in a daze, and shrugged his shoulders. He left her alone and flashed towards the direction where the Great Bright Will had left. In the depths of the dense forest 10 miles away, the Great Bright Will was really waiting for him. When the two met, the Great Bright Will looked behind him and found that he was alone. It couldn't help but ask, "You got rid of the netherworld saintess?" Chapter 11-12. Ignore her for now. Let's see if we can find the person Jintai mentioned. That person might be an old acquaintance of Wei Chuanqiu's. Yu Qianqiu's gaze searched around, thinking of where to look. Wei Chuanqiu knows him. De Mingluan was a little surprised. He didn't know when Wei Chuanqiu knew such a powerful person. He had never heard of him. He looked around in disbelief. This ancient forest is so vast. Do we really have to search one area at a time? Search one area at a time? Yu Qianqiu shook his head. I'm afraid we won't be able to find that person even if we search the entire ancient forest. I heard Wei Chuanqiu say that the person's residence seems to be in another world. Moreover, the entrance is erratic. It's not like the other two worlds that are fixed in one place after the passage opens. It's very mysterious. So we have to rely on luck to find that person. Otherwise, Jintai wouldn't have used such a stupid method to find that person. He suddenly turned his head to look at De Mingluan and smiled. Actually, we're just looking. Do we really have to risk our lives to help Jintai? If we run into him, we'll see. If we don't, then forget it. At least on the surface, we can get by with Jintai. Don't you think so? He probably didn't realize that without the World Commerce Association's subordinates in the immortal world as restraints, and after witnessing by Changchun's methods that were not inferior to the other experts at Jean Tai's wedding, his mentality had gradually changed. Although he didn't mean it, his tone when speaking to De Mingluan was no longer as respectful as when speaking to the commander of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. To be more precise, there was no need to act like a grandson in front of De Mingluan. And the Great Bright Will had accompanied him step by step, and he had subconsciously become a little unconcerned. Yu Qianqiu's mysterious means of sending Wei Chuanqiu and a large group of people to the Divine Ruin Realm, as well as his relationship with the Underworld Emperor and the Underworld Saintess, had all shocked him. Now he realized that this lad was somewhat unfathomable. Most importantly, Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng had a close relationship with this kid. Adding to the fact that they had risked their lives to save him, De Mingluan's mentality had changed greatly. Once the two of them finished discussing, they headed into the depths of the forest together. Walking from the edge of the ancient forest to the depths of the vast forest, one would find that the distance between the trees was getting thinner and thinner, but the individual trees were getting bigger and bigger. Even a dozen people holding hands would not be able to encircle these trees. Some of these towering trees were even hundreds of feet tall, and some of them had a canopy that could cover a radius of several miles, or even dozens of miles. The trunks of these trees were as sturdy and majestic as a city. It was hard to imagine how many years of snow, rain, wind, and frost they had experienced to grow to such a size. The magnificent trees attracted Yu Qianqiu from time to climb up to the crown of the trees. Standing on the branches, he looked around at the undulating green ocean. He realized that the scenery was even more spectacular and shocking than when he was flying in the sky. A gust of wind blew past, bringing with it a refreshing air. Amidst the rippling blue waves in front of him, there were also many beautiful purples and beautiful reds. There were all kinds of trees with leaves that were not green. A flock of white-feathered birds circled above the sea of trees for a while, then landed on the crown of the trees like blooming magnolia. One could even see light apes with their arms spread out, eagle cries circling in the sky, and tiger roars and ape cries below. It was a natural scene that fascinated people. De Mingluan, who was standing on the crown of the tree, looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He did not know why he looked so infatuated. De Mingluan had not experienced the destruction of nature in the industrial era of Yu Qianqiu's previous life. As an immortal with profound cultivation in this era, he could not understand the worship of nature of the people of that era. In the future, if it is possible, I would like to build a hut in this vast sea of trees and no longer care about the gratitude and grudges of this world. Standing on the crown of the tree, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the green ocean in all directions. De Mingluan did not know why he was sighing. Chu Tianji's eyes slightly muttered to himself. Where there are people, there are grudges. Once you step in, it is very difficult to leave. You do not want to provoke others, but there will always be people who cannot forget about you. If you want to live in seclusion, you must have enough strength. Otherwise, how can your former enemies let you go? How could he not know this principle? Yu Qianqiu casually plucked a leaf from the branch beside him and placed it in his mouth. After chewing for a while, the juice of the leaf was stuck in his mouth and a bitter taste spread on his tongue. After forcefully swallowing it, he could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Just think about that senior Mu that Wei Chuanqiu spoke of. If he did not have profound strength, how could he live in seclusion here for so many years without anyone daring to disturb him? The two of them jumped down from the crown of the tree and continued to search. Along the way, they discovered that on the dark ground covered by the towering trees, this land that never saw the light of day all year round began to reveal a wonder of life that was completely different from the outside world. All kinds of glowing plants. The deeper they went, the more glowing plants there were. Gradually, large groups of glowing plants appeared in their field of vision. Glowing moss, glowing mushrooms, all kinds of ferns and fungus plants displayed a dazzling array of colors. There were also all kinds of vines that were like weeping willows that emitted a natural and gentle glow. Yu Qianqiu marveled at the wonders of nature. He could not help but fall into a group of lavender-like plants that emitted a gentle purple light. This immediately startled the small animals that were lurking in or around it. Butterflies spread their glowing palm-sized wings and fluttered. Beetles with star-like spots of light on their shells hurriedly fluttered their wings and flew away. Just as they landed and climbed onto a tree trunk not far away, they saw a parrot-like bird with blue feathers on its head scuttling out from the branches and leaves of the tree trunk. It quickly hunted the beetles, and then chased after the beetles that were flying around. A group of porcupine-like little fellows with a cluster of bluish-white glowing thorns on their backs quickly escaped from under Yu Qianqiu's feet. A fierce female porcupine, in order to protect her cubs, bent the thorns on her back and took the initiative to attack Yu Qianqiu. As a result, she was kicked away by Yu Qianqiu, who did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. She rolled a few times not far away, and quickly ran away with the group of cubs while screaming. A few ghost-like black panthers crawled out of the natural cave formed by the roots of the tree. They stared at Yu Qianqiu with their green eyes, and let out a low growl. They seemed to be ready to attack. Yu Qianqiu ignored them. Instead, he raised his head and looked up at the tree. He saw a huge python in a colorful camouflage aiming at the black panthers below. It silently slid down the tree trunk and approached them. The black panthers seemed to have noticed something from Yu Qianqiu's actions. A black panther that seemed to be the leader raised its head and looked up at the tree. It immediately let out a frightened roar to warn the others. Several black panthers quickly fled. When the huge python saw that its prey had escaped, it raised its head and hissed angrily at Yu Qianqiu. It suddenly shot over like an arrow leaving the bow. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. The purple flame high-energy saber that was protecting his side immediately shot out a few streaks. In an instant, the huge python was torn into hundreds of pieces in midair. It fell to the ground in a rain of blood. The gorgeous and enchanting colors were immediately mixed with the smell of blood. It immediately caused the air to throb faintly. It seemed to have triggered something. It immediately made the great Mingluan, who was standing in the sea of flowers and on the tree trunk not far away, become vigilant. Suddenly, the ground made two soft sounds. Yu Qianqiu felt his legs tighten. He saw two tree roots that were as thick as an arm bursting out from the ground and wrapping around his legs. The roots quickly extended upwards and pierced towards Yu Qianqiu's chest like a sharp spear. Yu Qianqiu quickly grabbed it with both of his hands. He looked around and said, "What evildoer?" Before he could finish his sentence, the ground made a series of popping sounds. Hundreds of tree roots pierced towards him like spears. Yu Qianqiu shouted sternly, "You're courting death." His whole body exploded with a purple light that was condensed from a high temperature. Wherever the purple light flashed, all the plants turned into ashes. The tree roots that had shot out were instantly destroyed. A muffled groan was heard from the forest. The great Mingluan, who was standing on the tree trunk, stared at a big tree in front of him like an eagle. He waved his sleeves and a dozen bright moon-like light discs quickly shot out. With a series of so-so sounds, the dozens of light discs instantly destroyed the ancient tree in front of him. Audacious human. The remaining half of the big tree let out a strange cry. With a hong sound, it sunk into the ground. The dozens of light discs immediately chased after the deep pit that had appeared on the ground with a so-so sound. With a series of rumbling sounds, the light discs burst out from the ground and burrowed back into the great Mingluan's sleeves. The originally serene atmosphere in the surroundings immediately became treacherous. It's a tree demon. Its ability to burrow underground is not bad. It runs really fast. The great Mingluan snorted and looked around. He then frowned and said, "I'm afraid we've gotten into trouble. It's not good to stay here for long. It's better to leave as soon as possible. It's not that we're afraid of them. It's just that there are many plant demons in this ancient forest. It'll be very troublesome to get entangled with them." Just as Yu Qianqiu nodded his head, he heard a rumbling voice coming from all directions. "You want to leave? Too late." The shadows of the trees in all directions danced in the wind. The surrounding ancient trees suddenly grew and covered the sky. In an instant, they sealed off all directions. The great Mingluan flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side. Both of them floated in the air. Countless tree roots emerged from the ground. In a short while, all the glowing plants on the ground were annihilated in the churning soil. The tree roots on the ground were entangled tightly. The light in the surroundings immediately disappeared. It was pitch black. The great Mingluan looked around and snorted coldly. A group of things that don't know the immensity of the heaven and earth. If you don't move, don't blame me for killing you all. Suddenly, 8 balls of green light flashed out from the dense wall of trees. The sealed space was instantly filled with a dazzling green light. 8 green-robed old men walked out from the green light. Each of them had an angry look on their faces. One of the old men, who was wearing a green leaf crown, stared at the great bright wheel and said indifferently, "So it's an early-stage immortal emperor cultivator. No wonder you dare to boast so shamelessly. Outsiders, even immortal emperors from the immortal world wouldn't dare to be too presumptuous here. How are you compared to immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Our ancient forest and your immortal palace have an agreement not to invade each other. Why are you killing here?" Chapter 11-13. From the looks of it, this person seemed to be the leader of these people. De Mingluan took a closer look and was slightly shocked. He realized that he could not see through the person's cultivation. He looked at the others and found that their cultivation was similar to his. It seemed that this was going to be troublesome. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Yu Qianqiu about the situation and discussed whether they should fight or run away. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned. He did not expect that he would attract so many experts just by making a move. It seemed that this ancient forest was located within the 3 realms, but was independent of the 3 realms. There must be something extraordinary about it. It was obvious that there were more experts in the ancient forest. It would not be good for him to make a big deal out of this. Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, "You are exaggerating. A giant python ambushed me and I killed it. Then a tree demon attacked me first. I did not kill it because this is the ancient forest. If I really wanted to start a massacre, do you think it would have a chance to run?" As he spoke, there was a buzzing sound. His entire body was instantly enveloped by purple flames like firewood that had been ignited. An intense heat surged out. The green light that was flickering on the bodies of the 8 people instantly retracted and formed a protective aura on the surface of their bodies, resisting the frightening heat that made their hearts palpitate. All of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock and bewilderment. All of them felt a terrifying power that naturally countered each other, causing their hearts to tremble. The pupils of the old man wearing the green leaf crown suddenly shrank and he suddenly cried out, "This is purple fire! Purple fire! Purple fire of the true Samadhi fire!" The other 7 people also cried out, "Purple fire?" De Mingluan felt the terrifying temperature around his body. He also looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. He didn't know how many more secrets this fellow had. The tangled roots on the ground and the surrounding tree walls were visibly shrinking with a squeaking sound. It seemed that they were in great pain. Yu Qianqiu only wanted to show off. He did not want to become enemies with them. He quickly retracted the terrifying heat and the purple fire into his body. He looked at them with a smile, indicating that he really did not have any evil intentions. Once the purple fire disappeared, the 8 of them finally stabilized their trembling souls. At this moment, they realized that they could not see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. The 8 of them looked at each other, and the green light on the surface of their bodies retracted back into their bodies. The entangled tree roots on the ground quickly separated and retracted back into the soil. The surrounding tree walls also quickly retracted, and the ancient trees returned to their original positions. The hazy light began to shine down from the sky again. However, the various kinds of light plants that were buried in the soil could not be restored. The scattered light of the plants could be seen in the soil after the tumble of the light of the ground of the earth was much darker than before. I admit that your purple fire can restrain us. However, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. The old man wearing the green leaf crown stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "Since nothing serious happened, we do not want to make things difficult for you. We hope that you will abide by the agreement between us and the Immortal Palace. Please leave quickly." De Mingluan immediately snorted. Previously they were not so easy to talk to. It was obvious that they were here to punish us. Now that they realized that something was wrong, they immediately became easy to talk to. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him. He knew what that meant. However, although the purple fire was powerful, if he used it with his own cultivation, he would not be able to gain the upper hand if he really fought with these experts. The main reason was that the difference between their cultivation was too big. Moreover, he did not want to become enemies with the people in the ancient forest. Leave quickly? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He shook his head and said with a smile, I am afraid that I will have to disappoint you. This time, I was invited to the Woodkiller Sea as a guest. I have not met Senior Mu yet. How can I leave so easily? Woodkiller Sea. A few people frowned and muttered. It seemed that it was the first time they had heard of this. As for Senior Mu, there were simply too many people in the ancient forest who could be called Senior Mu. The 8 of them were no exception. It was also the first time that De Mingluan had heard of this place. However, he believed that Yu Qianqiu did not say it casually. There must be a reason for him to say it at this time. As he pondered, he felt that this Yu Qianqiu was a bit mysterious. In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't know about the Woodkiller Sea. He had only heard Wei Chuanqiu mention it once, so he casually used it. In any case, he never had any psychological burden when he spoke carelessly. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept across the 8 people. From the eyes of the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown, he caught a trace of surprise and uncertainty. He immediately smiled at him and said, Presumably you should know about the Woodkiller Sea. The other 7 people's gazes immediately focused on him. They all revealed a questioning look. One of them even asked, You really know? The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown hesitated for a while. He muttered, In the past, when I traveled the entire ancient forest, I vaguely heard people mention that the Woodkiller Sea seemed to be the name of the ancient forest's holy land. The person who said this also heard it, but did not dare to confirm it. I did not expect to hear this place mentioned again today. I almost forgot about this name. Damn. Jin Tai was right. Even the old man who lived here for a long time did not know about it. Yu Qianqiu was a little disappointed. However, he heard the 7 people say in unison, Holy Land. It seemed like they had never heard of the Woodkiller Sea before. Holy Land. Yu Qianqiu's spirit was lifted. He looked left and right and said with a mouthful of nonsense, Yes, that's right. The Woodkiller Sea is the holy land of the ancient forest. Do you know where it is? Everyone's gazes immediately focused on him. Although the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown was somewhat mentally prepared, he still could not help but say in surprise, The Senior Mu you are talking about is the Senior Mu from the Holy Land? Yu Qianqiu was immediately filled with joy. Finally, he had a chance to find the place where the wood spirit lived. Although he could not devour it now, he could first find the place and mark it. Who knows, it might be useful in the future. He immediately nodded and said, Yes, yes, it is the Senior Mu from your holy land. Although he was not sure, he was most likely right. You were invited by the Senior Mu from the Holy Land? The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown asked in disbelief. Yes, yes, I was invited by him. Yu Qianqiu nodded sincerely. De Mingluan looked at him suspiciously. The old man was not an idiot. After the initial shock, he realized that something was wrong. He also asked suspiciously, Since Senior Mu invited you to the Holy Land as a guest, how could you not find the Holy Land? Yu Qianqiu spread his hands without hesitation and said with a bitter smile, Senior Mu's cultivation is profound, and I view him as a god. He said he would let me visit the ancient forest's holy land, the Woodkiller Sea, as a guest. I naturally agreed on the spot, and I was a man of my word. But I did not know that the Holy Land, the Woodkiller Sea, was so hard to find. After searching for a few days, I did not even see Senior Mu's shadow. If you guys know where the Holy Land is, why don't you bring me there? I will reward you handsomely. He said it as if it was the truth. Was he for real? De Mingluan suppressed the suspicion in his eyes. He was afraid that others would misunderstand. You have seen Senior Mu from the Holy Land? An old man said enviously. The others were also envious. It was as if meeting Senior Mu was such a lucky thing. The old man wearing a wooden crown was envious, but he shook his head regretfully. Senior Mu is mysterious. There are only legends about him in the ancient forest. The number of people who have seen him can be counted on one's fingers. Even if they have seen him, it is a taboo. Very few people would talk about Senior Mu, so I do not know who has seen him. The gate to the Holy Land is even more elusive. Without a certain amount of luck, it is impossible to enter. Legend has it that if we wood cultivators are lucky enough to enter the Holy Land, we will receive guidance from Senior Mu. It is very beneficial to our cultivation. Unfortunately, we do not have the fortune to go to the Holy Land. The others heard this and had a look of yearning. Only Yu Qianqiu observed their expressions and said with disappointment, "So you guys do not know where the Holy Land is?" "Indeed, we do not know." The old man wearing a wooden crown shook his head. He suddenly paused and said, "But since you were invited by Senior Mu, perhaps you can try your luck at the ancient language tree. Maybe you will encounter the gate to the Holy Land." Ancient language tree? Where is it? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. The old man waved his hand and pointed to the east. In the center of the ancient forest, there is a cliff. Beside the waterfall, there is a towering tree called the ancient language tree. Its leaves are yellow and withered. It is said that it has died for countless years. But it has not died for countless years. It has experienced countless snow, rain, wind, and frost, but its withered leaves have not fallen. It is very magical. The most amazing thing is that whenever the wind blows, you can hear a strange murmur under the tree. It is as if someone is talking. This is also the origin of the name, ancient language tree. Unfortunately, very few people can understand what it is saying. It is said that those who can understand it can find the gate to the Holy Land. You guys should go and try. Are there many people in the ancient forest? It must be a gathering of experts. Will it be inconvenient for people from the outside world to go there? Yu Qianqiu asked in detail. He was worried that trespassing into the forbidden area would cause the experts in the ancient forest to gang up on him. The old man paused and immediately understood his concern. He sighed and said, "I heard that it used to be lively there. But too many people wasted their time under the ancient language tree, but they could not understand what it said. Almost all of them returned in disappointment. Plus, it is inconvenient for us wood elementalists to leave our bodies for too long. As time goes by, except for some newcomers, no one else will go there." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched, and he cursed in his heart. He felt that the old man's guidance was too unreliable. He didn't even need to guess to know that it was only a legend. If it was useful, then the Wood Demon Sea, which regarded it as a holy land, would probably swarm there every day. Chapter 11:14. The old man seemed to know that this matter was not very reliable, and was afraid of making the other party unhappy. He smiled awkwardly and said, "I was just saying. Sire, please do as you wish. If there is nothing else, we will take our leave." "Take care." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to stop. He stared at the old man and slowly asked, "The ancient forest is so big. How am I going to find the center?" The Mingluan looked at him speechlessly. It seemed like this guy really wanted to do something useless. The old man was very honest. He waved his hand again and pointed to the east. He said with a serious expression, "Go straight to the east. When you see a cliff with a waterfall and a lonely ancient tree, you will reach the center of the ancient forest. The environment there is very obvious and easy to find. You will see it when you get there." Then he kindly warned, "If Sire really wants to go there, I suggest you go straight to the sky. You can more or less avoid some unnecessary trouble. You must know that not everyone in this ancient forest is kind. That is all I have to say. I will take my leave." The other 7 people also followed him and cupped their hands. The soil on the ground surged like a fountain and swallowed the 8 of them. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. "Did you really receive an invitation to the wood-killing sea?" The Mingluan suddenly turned around and asked. Yu Qianqiu looked around and laughed. He did not answer the question. "Since it is like this, I will just treat it as an eye-opener. Let's go." A figure rushed into the sky and broke through the shade. The Mingluan shook his head and followed closely behind. Looking down from the sky, the ancient forest was still endless. The mountains were undulating and the waves were like the sea. It looked spectacular, but it was unknown how many dangers were hidden within. After flying at high speed for 3 days, the two of them who were constantly looking around suddenly slowed down and slowly stopped in the air. In front of the two of them was a red cliff. The cliff was exposed and the rocks were red. It was almost barren. It was very conspicuous in this vast ancient forest. A river meandered out of the forest and crossed the cliff. When it reached the end of the cliff, it was covered by the canopy of a towering golden tree. It was as if all the river water had gathered under the tree. The sound of water splashing could be heard faintly. It should be here. De Mingluan pointed below and said. Yes. That ancient tree should be the ancient language tree. Let's go. Let's go down and take a look. Yu Qianqiu was the first to go down. He was stunned when he landed under the tree. The De Mingluan who followed was also stunned. There were two people who had arrived before them. One was wearing a golden robe while the other was wearing a white robe, and was barefoot. The two were looking back. These two people were none other than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. It was unknown when they had met here, but since Yu Qianqiu and the Great Bright Will could find this place, it was naturally not strange for them to find this place as well. Yu Qianqiu didn't move from his spot, but the Great Bright Will flashed over and greeted the two. Greetings, Immortal Emperor. Greetings, Underworld King. Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the De Mingluan. He smiled faintly and said, It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place. He turned to Jin Tai and said, Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance? Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the De Mingluan. He smiled faintly and said, It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place. He turned to Jin Tai and said, Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance? Jin Tai turned around and looked at the vast green sea at the foot of the mountain. He pointed to both sides of the cliff and said, You search from this side, I'll search from that side. We'll flank both sides. He then pointed to the front and signaled to De Mingluan, All of you search from the middle. This all of you obviously included Yu Qianqiu. Bai Qi looked ahead and was silent for a while. He said slowly, What if we can't find it? Jin Tai said resolutely, Then we will lure Wang Qing and the rest here, and then set a few big fires to burn the ancient forest. I want to see how long Old Man Mu can hide. Bai Qi raised his eyebrows and suddenly looked at him and said, You mean to kill with a borrowed knife? Lure Wang Qing and the rest here, and then set fire to the ancient forest. Then push the blame to Wang Qing and the rest, and let that Old Man Mu settle the score with them? That's what you said. I didn't say that. Jin Tai snorted coldly and turned into a stream of light and shot to the left. Bai Qi sneered and turned to smile at Yu Qianqiu. Then he also turned into a stream of light and shot to the right. Two rays of light, one gold and one white, flew along the cliff and disappeared into the dense forest in the distance in the blink of an eye. This red bare cliff was like a plain. No one knew how the river that was tens of meters wide was formed. Yu Qianqiu walked along the shore towards the great Ming wheel under the ancient tree. From time to time, fat fish jumped out of the water and fell back into the water. When he reached the edge of the steep cliff, he saw that the river suddenly turned into a crystal waterfall, and the sound of water flowing could be heard. Incomparably thick tree roots climbed up the cliff like countless pythons, and even stubbornly rooted into the red rocks. More than a dozen tree roots drilled out from the mountain wall in the waterfall, extending down the mountain wall along the waterfall. Strong and powerful tree roots could also be seen in the river on the cliff. The exposed roots of the ancient tree occupied an area of several hundred meters on the cliff. In fact, the entire tree was small compared to some of the towering trees in the ancient forest, but it was estimated to be at least 100 meters tall. The trunk would not be able to be encircled by less than 20 people. The branches were bronze in color and spread out in all directions, and were covered with golden leaves the size of a palm. It was like a golden canopy protecting the area. The red cliff was almost barren, there was a clear river, and there was a yellow ancient tree. On the other side of the cliff was a green ancient forest, and there were blue sky and white clouds. The colors were so distinct that it made people feel like they were in an oil painting. Yu Qianqiu had taken out a flying sword at some point in time. He stood on the thick and exposed roots of the tree and forcefully hacked at the ancient tree a few times. Unexpectedly, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. After spending a lot of effort to chop off a piece of rough bark, he turned around and shouted to Demingluan, "It's really a withered tree, but it's really hard. No wonder it can stand here for so long." After saying that, he directly sat on the thick roots and rested with his back against the big tree. Demingluan was speechless. He walked towards him and asked, "What do we do now? Do you really want to try your luck here? There's no smoke without fire. With this legend, there must be some truth to it. Since I'm here, I'll just take things as they come. If I don't try, how will I know if it's true or not?" Yu Qianqiu laughed and lay there with his hands on his head. Demingluan, who was originally worried about the future of the Immortal Palace after it collapsed, was also infected by his emotions. Thinking that this guy had a backup plan, there was indeed nothing to worry about. After thinking it through, he unloaded the psychological burden and relaxed his body. He walked with large strides to the side of Yu Qianqiu and laid down leisurely like him. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at him and smiled. "That's right. Being relaxed is the way of the king. It's so tiring to keep a straight face all day long." Demingluan was just about to open his mouth to say something when suddenly a gust of wind blew. The golden leaves above swayed, and the whole ancient tree actually let out a faint murmur under the wind. When the wind was strong, the murmur became louder. When the wind was light, it sounded like a gentle lullaby. The two guys lying on the roots immediately widened their eyes and listened attentively, hoping to hear something. However, after listening for a long time, they still couldn't hear anything. The wind stopped, and the sound also stopped. Yu Qianqiu stared at the slightly swaying leaves above him and said, "Did you hear anything? This is clearly the sound of the wind blowing through this tree. It would be strange if I could hear anything." Demingluan coldly snorted. "It's really just a rumor. Do you really want to continue waiting? Don't jump to conclusions so easily. Why don't we wait for a day and see? If there are no abnormal changes tomorrow, it won't be too late to leave." Just as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, another gust of wind blew, and the ancient tree started to murmur again. The two people's ears perked up again. There were so many winds in the mountain. Every once in a while, they would hear the ancient tree humming a lullaby. This made Yu Qianqiu feel a little drowsy. Suddenly, there was a paw-paw sound in the river. A fish jumped out of the water and fell back. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sat up and wiped his face with both hands. He felt that it was too dangerous to fall asleep in a place like this. When he turned around, Demingluan had already sat up and was looking at him with a cold smile. It seemed to be saying, "You can even fall asleep here, I really have to give it to you." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and said, "I'll go get something to relieve my fatigue." Then he dashed towards the bottom of the cliff far away. Demingluan was curious about what this fellow was going to do. After a while, he saw him scurrying back from the bottom of the cliff with a big pile of firewood in his hands. He threw it on the ground, and then took out two swords and ran to the river bank to look around. Suddenly, two water pillars shot out from the water and wrapped around two fat carps. They dashed towards the swords in Yu Qianqiu's hands and opened their mouths to swallow the swords in their hands. Yu Qianqiu carried the two big carps and ran back to the pile of firewood. He took out a set of barbecue utensils. The firewood on the ground was quickly chopped into pieces and stuffed into the barbecue utensils. With a wave of his hand, a ball of red flame was spat out and the firewood in the barbecue utensils turned into bright red charcoal. The two fat carps were still twisting their bodies even though they were dead. They were then grilled over the charcoal. After doing all these, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands excitedly and took out 2 jars of wine. He threw one of them to Demingluan, who was stunned. He then opened the seal and gulped down a few mouthfuls before putting it aside. He took out some seasoning and brushed it on the dead carps. He was beautiful, but when combined with the environment at this moment and place, he really ruined the scenery. Demingluan was really speechless. He could only sigh as he leaned against the tree and drank by himself. When the aroma of the barbecue was wafting in the air, he suddenly heard Yu Qianqiu's "eh." Demingluan turned around and saw Yu Qianqiu standing there curiously and said, "This aroma? Don't tell me the barbecue in the ancient forest also has this aroma?" He held his sword with both hands and raised it in front of his face. He fanned his nostrils and sniffed the barbecue in his hand. Chapter 11:15. What's wrong? Great Brightwell asked indifferently. He suddenly realized that this fellow's words and actions seemed to be incompatible with this world. Why would the roasted fish have the fragrance from Lu Er's body? It doesn't seem to be from the roasted fish. Yu Qianqiu muttered. His face popped out from behind the two big roasted fish and said, "Do you smell something?" "Nonsense. Of course it's the smell of the roasted fish." Great Brightwell said in a bad mood. "That's not right. Could it be?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and he immediately looked around. De Mingluan's pupils that were looking at him suddenly shrank. He saw that the place where Yu Qianqiu was standing suddenly had a layer of transparent black ripple light wall. If it wasn't for the clear and crystalline light, it would be almost impossible to notice. And Yu Qianqiu, who was inside it, was looking around like a thief, as if he had stolen 2 grilled fish from someone. "Be careful behind you!" Great Brightwell cried out in alarm. Yu Qianqiu was shocked when he heard this. He suddenly turned around and his entire body suddenly disappeared. Great Brightwell shot out rapidly and a series of light wheels shot out from his sleeves, shooting towards the wall of light with the force of lightning. However, the exploding light wheels missed. That wall of light seemed to have disappeared at the same time as Yu Qianqiu. The great bright wheel that flashed away searched around the roasted fish. The 10 light wheels that were retracted circled around his body to protect him, as if he was facing a great enemy. After that, Great Brightwell flew into the sky and quickly patrolled the surroundings. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a trace of Yu Qianqiu in all directions. When he returned to the side of the barbecue set, the Great Brightwell kicked the barbecue set into the river dozens of meters away with a clang sound. He looked around his surroundings silently, thinking about what had happened just now. Normally, it was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to leave without saying a word. Furthermore, the situation just now, the Great Brightwell was suddenly slightly stunned. Could it be that the mysterious rippling light wall just now was the so-called gate of the sacred land? The more he pondered, the more he felt that it was the case. A gust of wind blew by, and the ancient whisperer tree repeated the same ancient voice that it had been murmuring for countless years. De Mingluan looked at the ancient whisperer tree, and after a moment of absent-mindedness, he shook his head and said to himself with a bitter smile, "Is this kid really that lucky? People couldn't find the door to the Holy Land, but he was roasting fish here, and he accidentally entered it? Grilled fish? Unless, otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence?" The Great Brightwell seemed to have thought of something, and hurriedly flashed to the riverside. He picked up the severely deformed barbecue set from the kick, and used his great cultivation to roughly repair it with a caw-caw sound. Carrying the barbecue set, he carefully examined the position that Yu Qianqiu had placed it earlier, and restored it to its original position. Then he tossed the remaining dry firewood on the ground into the barbecue set, and quickly started a fire. This wasn't the end. He also took out 2 flying swords and with a shwa-shwa sound, he stabbed 2 fat carps into the riverside. After everything was ready, he imitated Yu Qianqiu's previous actions, and also pretended to roast the fish. However, he seemed to be a little absent-minded, and would occasionally look behind him. Speaking of which, when Yu Qianqiu heard the Great Brightwell's warning, he abruptly turned around to be on guard. Before he could figure out what was going on, he felt as if he had collided with someone. His head also made a dong sound, as if he had been hit by something with a stick. In the end, before he could even cry out in pain, a soft and pleasant ouch came from the other side. Yu Qianqiu was instantly enraged. He hit someone and still cried out in pain. This was too much of a bully. Yu Qianqiu focused his eyes and saw a green-clothed little girl staggering back from the collision. When he saw who it was, he couldn't help but be stunned. The green-clothed little girl rubbing her nose also froze when she saw who it was. Lu Er. Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. If the little girl in front of him wasn't Lu Er, who he had saved and brought back to the World Merchant Association, then who else could it be? He saw Lu Er carrying a large brown wooden staff. The staff seemed to be made from 2 intertwined tree roots, and the head of the staff was like a large lingji mushroom. It seemed to be very out of place in Lu Er's hands. Yu Qianqiu. Lu Er was also stunned. If the person in front of her wasn't Yu Qianqiu, then who else could it be? It was just that his expression was somewhat fierce, and he was carrying 2 swords in his hands, as if he wanted to eat someone who had offended him. But the strange thing was that there were 2 fragrant dead and deformed fish stuck in the 2 swords. He didn't know what he was doing. Yu Qianqiu's dull gaze suddenly moved left and right, attracted by the surrounding greenery. In the distance, there was a thin mist, and the forest was like splashed ink. The mountains were secluded, and the refreshing air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and plants. It was as quiet as a painting, as if he had fallen into a dream. The little girl carrying an uncoordinated staff in front of him was a bit of a wet blanket. Where is this place? Yu Qianqiu had 2 grilled fish stuck in his hands, and he quickly turned around to look at his surroundings. He realized that in the moment he turned around, the scenery had suddenly changed. Right now, he was standing on a hillside that wasn't considered high. His gaze fell upon an ancient tree behind him, and he was once again dumbfounded. The golden leaves and the bronze trunk were exactly the same as the ancient tree he had seen on the cliff earlier. The only difference was that the ancient language tree from before was entrenched on a red stone cliff, while this one was entrenched on a mountain peak. Looking into the distance, it wasn't quite possible to say that it was the same tree, but it was too similar to say that it wasn't the same tree. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew, and the golden leaves rustled. The familiar murmuring was like a lullaby, reverberating in his ears again. However, the surrounding scenery had completely changed, and there wasn't the slightest similarity. Yu Qianqiu looked at the ancient tree in a daze. Ancient language tree. Yu Qianqiu, how did you come in? Lu Er, who was carrying a large staff, also asked in a daze. Lu, what is this place? Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and asked. Lu Er, who was carrying a large staff, was stunned, and said, This is Wood Killer Sea. Wood Killer Sea? Yu Qianqiu's head quickly swayed left and right, and looked around again. He said in disbelief, This is Wood Killer Sea? How is this possible? I was grilling fish just fine. Why did I suddenly come to Wood Killer Sea? F***ck. This is too illogical. Could it be this? His gaze stared at the ancient language tree with golden leaves. What is this? Lu Er, who was already confused, was even more confused. Suddenly she cried out in shock. Not good. Not good. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to leave. What's wrong? Hearing her say it so seriously, even Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Lu Er carried the brown wooden staff with both hands and activated it with a secret technique. The large staff had immediately brewed a ball of green light. As Lu Er waved the staff, a beam of green light shot towards the ancient language tree like a laser. The trunk of the ancient language tree immediately rippled with green light, and gradually emitted a black splendor. Emph! A sullen cold snort sounded, and a green-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion suddenly appeared. With a wave of his hand, he cut off the green light that shot out from the head of the huge staff. His palm made a grabbing motion, and the big-headed staff in Lu Er's hand was immediately sucked over, and caught in his hand. Ah! Lu Er cried out in shock, and quickly flashed behind Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately protected her, and angrily shouted as if he was facing a great enemy. Who is it? You're already so old. Yet you still want to snatch a little girl's things. Don't you have any shame? The roasted fish on the 2 swords in his hands still had a lingering fragrance. The green-robed old man looked at him calmly, and the wooden staff in his hand stood upright on the ground. He said indifferently, So it's you? Lu Er, come out. He was brought in by you? Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. Hearing the meaning behind these words, the other party seemed to know him, but he didn't seem to have any impression of him. Lu Er, who was behind him, moved half her body out submissively, and one hand grabbed onto the clothes on the back of Yu Qianqiu. She looked at the old man and weakly called out, Grandpa! Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and struggled free from the small hand that was grabbing onto his clothes. He looked at Lu Er and said, He's your grandpa? Isn't the old man selling snacks in hallucinatory Immortal City your grandpa? How many grandpas do you have? Lu Er secretly glanced at the old man and said in a low voice, Of course there's only one grandpa. The one you saw last time was grandpa's transformation. Upon hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was shocked and sized up the old man again. He thought to himself, no wonder even Jin Tai wanted to find him for help. As expected, he was a very capable person. Whether it was tall or short, fat or thin, his spirit was completely different from that old man last time. This wasn't as simple as a disguise, but a transformation. Supernatural power. So you're Senior Mu. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly bowed and said. Yu Qianqiu was impolite just now. I didn't know that you were senior, please forgive me. Old man Mu didn't care about him at all. He stared at Lu'er and shouted again, he was brought in by you? Lu'er pouted aggrievedly and said, no. I also don't know how he came in. He suddenly appeared. With his understanding of the little girl, old man Mu could tell that she wasn't lying. He then stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, speak. How on earth did you come in? If there's a single lie, I'll beat you to death immediately. Yu Qianqiu flashed the grilled fish on the two swords and said with a wry smile. Whether Senior believes it or not, I don't know how I came in either. I was clearly grilling fish under the ancient language tree in the ancient forest. Who knew that I would turn around and inexplicably appear here? Even if you ask me to explain, I can't explain what's going on either. Grilling fish under the ancient language tree? Old man Mu's tone was filled with disbelief. He turned around and pointed his cane at the ancient language tree. Immediately, a green window appeared on the ancient language tree. Like a TV screen. The scene that Yu Qianqiu had seen on the cliff in the ancient forest appeared. Old man Mu waved his cane, and the scene slowly rotated. In the end, it was fixed at an angle. The green window showed the scene of the great bright will grilling fish with two swords. That guy didn't mind grilling fish, but he kept looking around vigilantly from time to time. His eyes clearly met with the three people here, but he continued to look around vigilantly as if he hadn't seen anything. Judging from the angle from which the window was looking at the great bright wheel, Yu Qianqiu estimated that the place where the great bright wheel was observing the ancient language tree on the cliff. He didn't expect that the ancient language tree could also monitor the outside world. It was really amazing. Chapter 11:16. Before he could think further, old man Mu waved his cane, and the green window disappeared. He reluctantly believed that Yu Qianqiu had been roasting fish outside, but this did not mean that he believed everything. He turned around and stared at Yu Qianqiu with his deep eyes. You went to the ancient language tree in the ancient forest to roast fish? If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, although I am not a bloodthirsty person, I will not be lenient to those with ulterior motives. Yu Qianqiu secretly communicated with Utopia, and when he noticed that it was unobstructed, he immediately had the confidence to protect himself. He immediately said bluntly, to tell you the truth, I came to look for you. Look for me? Old man Mu was slightly stunned and then snorted. Did that little bat ask you to come? Little bat? Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and then realized that he was talking about Wei Chuanqiu. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Senior, you misunderstood me. I didn't want to take the risk here, but I couldn't disobey Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's orders, so I had to bite the bullet and come here. I never thought that I would really meet you, but who knew that I would run into you? Jin Tai asked you to look for me. Old man Mu also showed a hint of confusion on his face. He didn't ask me to come alone. The person who was roasting fish outside just now also asked me to come. There are a total of 11 people, including Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Netherworld Bai Qi. Everyone is scattered throughout the entire ancient forest to look for you, Senior, Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. Jin Tai and Bai Qi are here too? Old man Mu's eyes turned and he asked with some emotion. Did something happen outside? Something big has happened. Yu Qianqiu sighed. From Jin Tai's wedding, to Bai Changchun's appearance, to the sudden appearance of Wang Qing, the head of the Heartless Palace, to the sudden appearance of a new force and the defeat of the Immortal Palace, to the King of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng's attack on the Dark Imperial Palace, and finally Jin Tai's decision to ask Old Man Mu for help. So they fled here to find Old Man Mu. During this period, He and the Daming Will encountered that group of wood demons and learned about the legend of the ancient language tree. Then he told Yu Qianqiu roughly what had happened. This narration went on for more than an hour. Such a series of ups and downs made the inexperienced Luer's eyes light up. Her face was filled with hope, as if she wished she could be there to experience it. Although the outside world was dangerous, it had a fatal attraction to her. Although Old Man Mu had been suppressing her and wanted her to live an ordinary life, for a person like her who had never experienced the joys and sorrows of the world, how could she settle down if she could not calm down? How could she appreciate the value of ordinary life? Perhaps after she experienced the endless vicissitudes of life and understood that the past was unbearable, she would be willing to live an ordinary life like her grandfather. After a moment of silence, Old Man Mu sighed slightly and said, "It seems that it is time for the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld to change dynasties again." Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Listening to these words, it seemed that the other party would not help Jin Tai turn over a new leaf. In fact, he also wanted this old guy to come out and help Jin Tai. After all, Jin Tai was in power, and he still had room to develop slowly, but the Heartless Palace wanted to kill him. Now it seemed that the relationship between Jin Tai and this old guy was not solid. Jin Tai wanted to ask for Senior's help. "Are you going to leave him in the lurch?" Yu Qianqiu asked tentatively. "What do you mean by leave him in the lurch?" Old Man Mu slightly closed his eyes and shook his head, saying, "People don't distinguish between right and wrong. They fight for honor and disgrace. The honored will live in peace, and the disgraced will be mediocre." He asked for everything. "I have seen a lot of changes of dynasties. It is because I don't want to get involved that I live in seclusion here. What does Jin Tai's life and death have to do with me? How can I leave him in the lurch?" As he said this, he opened his eyes and said, "Do you really want to be a lobbyist for Jin Tai? As far as I know, all the sects in the Immortal Realm have a grudge against the Immortal Palace. As the sect leader of the World Chamber of Commerce, don't tell me that you are willing to submit to Jin Tai." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. The other party had already said this much. He knew that it was useless to say anything else. But then again, he was just trying. If he could help Jin Tai turn over a new leaf, it would be a little good. If Jin Tai couldn't turn over a new leaf, it would be good too. That guy's character was really not flattering. The battle at the Immortal Palace had shown that even the lives of his trusted subordinates were worthless in his eyes. It made people feel too insecure. As the saying goes, when a wall is down, people push it. Yu Qianqiu was also not a good guy. After confirming that Old Man Mu would not help Jin Tai, in order to please Old Man Mu, he made up his mind to simply kill that inhumane pervert Jin Tai. After a moment of hesitation, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands in obeisance and said, "Senior, after you took Luer from the World Chamber of Commerce last time, Wei Chuanqiu reprimanded me and warned me that I must be respectful when I see you again. So there are some things that I dare not hide from you." Old Man Mu only had a high cultivation and extensive knowledge, but he was not omniscient. When he heard this irrelevant and groundless interjection, he could not help but be startled and said, "What do you want to say?" "It's like this. I inadvertently learned of a conspiracy of Jin Tai. If I can't find Senior for help or Senior is unwilling to help, Jin Tai is going to lure Wangqing and the others from the Heartless Palace to the ancient forest, and then set the ancient forest on fire to push the blame to Wangqing and the others. Jin Tai said that if he does this, Senior will definitely not let Wangqing and the others go." Yu Qianqiu said with a respectful face, looking like he was snitching. "How dare he?" Old Man Mu's long beard and green robe instantly fluttered even though there was no wind. He snorted and said, "Even if you give him 10 guts, he still won't dare." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He could see that this old man thought himself to be an expert, and had probably never taken Jin Tai seriously. He did not know Jin Tai's character very well, so water had entered his brain. With Jin Tai's character, he would marry his wife with great fanfare when he was in power, but once he lost power he would abandon his wife and subordinates and run for his life. Now that he had lost his wife, he did not even mention it. Just imagine, if he was forced into a corner, what else would he not do? However, based on the understanding between the two parties, It was not appropriate for Yu Qianqiu to argue with him. He could only take it one step at a time and nodded repeatedly to flatter him. That's true. Unless Jin Tai is courting death, he would not dare to act recklessly. Old Man Mu indeed did not take Jin Tai seriously, and quickly put aside the matter of Jin Tai. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Didn't Little Bat tell you not to see Luer again? Damn it. I have told you so many things. Are you going to fall out with me so quickly?" Yu Qianqiu quickly contacted Utopia and made preparations to escape. Then he cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. Of course Wei Chuanqiu said that, but I really barged in carelessly. Please forgive me, Senior. Lu was holding his two swords that had pierced through the grilled fish, and looked at them carefully. Upon hearing this, she quickly nodded at Old Man Mu and said, "Grandpa, he really didn't do it on purpose, just let him go this time." Ouch. Before she could finish speaking, Old Man Mu had already knocked her on the head with his crutch and said angrily, "If you hadn't stolen my crutch to open the gate, how could he have barged in by chance? You are addicted to sneaking away now." It turned out that ever since Lu went out to see the prosperous world outside, her heart had become wild. The days in the wood-killing sea were too boring and not as fun as the colorful world outside. The last time she sneaked out, she was caught by Old Man Mu and locked up for a short while. She couldn't hold it in anymore, so she stole her grandfather's cane to open the Xianmen Gate. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would turn around and knock her back when the Xianmen Gate was opened? As a result, the Xianmen Gate lost the support of Dharma power and closed on the spot, dragging Yu Qianqiu, who had just stepped into the Xianmen Gate, in. This matter could be said to be coincidental, but it could also be said to be uncoincidental. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, even Luer did not know the inside story. Only Old Man Du Mu himself knew. The ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea and the ancient language tree in the ancient forest were actually the same tree. It was like something in a mirror that was reflected in the two planes. However, it was different from the reflection in the mirror. It was not an illusion but a real object. Whether it was the ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea, or the ancient language tree in the ancient forest, the ancient language trees on both sides would disappear at the same time. The ancient language tree was actually the hub that connected the two worlds. The ancient language tree was really ancient. It was the first tree that grew after the celestial realm was established. It could be said to be the ancestor of all trees in the celestial realm. Although it was blessed by nature and lived for a long time, it was unable to develop spiritual intelligence and cultivate immortality. However, it absorbed a considerable amount of the essence of the universe, and gave birth to the first wood spirit in the celestial realm. It was the current owner of the wood-killing sea, Old Man Mu Yuanzi. Later, due to the endless disputes between the three realms, Mu Yuanzi couldn't stand the disturbance, and wanted to open up a world to live in. However, with his cultivation, he was far from being able to open up a world alone. He had to borrow the magical effect of the ancient language tree, the ancestor of all trees, and use it as a medium to open up a small world. Thus, the wood-killing sea and the celestial realm overlapped. It was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds at the same time. It was very magical. It was also because the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea overlapped that with Mu Yuanzi's current cultivation, as long as there were plants in the two worlds, he could open the profound door at any time and go anywhere in the two worlds. However, Luer didn't have that ability. If she wanted to open the profound door and go between the two worlds, not only did she need the power of Mu Yuanzi's staff, she also needed to find a stable medium, which was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds. Therefore, it wasn't strange that the plants in the ancient forest treated the ancient language tree as the key to entering the wood-killing sea. A long time ago, when Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was still weak, he did often open the profound door here to go between the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea. After a long time, it was inevitable that he would be seen by others. However, with his current cultivation base, there was no longer a need for him to use the ancient language tree. This was also the reason why the plant demons in the ancient forest could no longer find the opportunity to enter the wood massacre sea through the ancient language tree. It was also because of this that this matter could be said to be both coincidental and unfortunate. After Mu Yuanzi listened to Yu Qianqiu's explanation, and checked the position of his roasted fish. Coupled with Luer's actions, he immediately understood. Chapter 11:17. Luer, who was reprimanded, threw away the sword with the grilled fish in it. Rubbing her forehead that was hit, she pouted in grievance. The people here all let me play mahjong. No matter how I play, it's always me who makes the wrong tiles. It's too boring. Playing mahjong again. You can't make any progress in your cultivation, only thinking about playing. Mu Yuanzi flew into a rage. His cane mercilessly hit Luer's head. The latter held her head and cried out in pain. Playing mahjong? Yu Qianqiu's expression had already collapsed. He looked speechlessly at the grandfather-granddaughter pair. He didn't think that mahjong had already become popular in Mu Monster Sea. Could it be that there were other mahjong friends here? Just as he was lost in his thoughts, Mu Yuanzi's cane was already pointed at him. He scolded. It's all your fault. If I see you and Luer meet again, I'll kill you with one strike. Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. He didn't think that saving someone's granddaughter would turn out to be wrong. It was simply unreasonable. However, the situation was stronger than him. This old man was even more awesome than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. If he couldn't provoke him, he could at least hide. Senior Mu, this junior knows his mistake. That. Yu Qianqiu first admitted his mistake. He looked around and weakly asked, May I know how this junior should leave this place? But in his heart, he was thinking, a gentleman's revenge is never too late. Wait until I plant the teleportation landmark and provoke old man by one day. Let's see who is more arrogant then. Luer, who was rubbing her forehead, suddenly widened her eyes. Yu Qianqiu, are you leaving? Her innocent eyes turned to look at her grandfather. They were filled with hope, as if she wanted to beg her grandfather to let Yu Qianqiu stay. Mu Yuanzi turned his head indifferently. He couldn't be bothered to look at her. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a burning gaze and said word by word. You've cultivated a technique to control the wood attribute. Yu Qianqiu was stunned when he heard this. The words would spell suddenly flashed through his mind, but he did not practice it at all. He did not know why this old fellow would ask such a question. Amidst the clouds of doubt, a sudden gust of wind blew past. The golden leaves of the ancient language tree began to sway in the wind, and the murmuring of the wind sounded once again. The dreamy and illusory voice seemed to be recounting the endless vicissitudes of life, causing those who heard it to be worried. At the foot of the mountain, the forest was like a layer of mist rising in spirals from splashed ink. The mist came with the wind and blew on the three people on the mountain. Mu Yuanzi and Luer were used to this scene, so they did not feel anything. However, Yu Qianqiu felt a rich and fragrant spiritual energy seeping into his heart. His mind was instantly roused. Just as he was about to praise and flatter Mu Yuanzi, his brain twitched uncontrollably. In an instant, his vision turned black, and images of the starry night sky that he had been dreaming of appeared in his mind. The countless stars that seemed to be in a mess flipped through his mind night after night, and the speed was getting faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, the movements of the stars became traceable. However, this scene in his mind only lasted for a few moments. When the wind blew past and the fog dispersed, Yu Qianqiu woke up from his daze. Although he had woken up, his body trembled in the next moment. He looked somewhat excitedly at the mist that curled up from the ink-like layer of forest that covered the mountains and plains. The Eastern Star Map. It was the Eastern Star Map that had been deeply engraved in his mind. For so long, he had been helpless against it. However, in that instant, it had suddenly been triggered. The pattern was so clear. Could it be that this was the land of great fortune to cultivate the wood's secret art? Yu Qianqiu's heart surged in that instant. He repeatedly repeated the three words, would killer see, in his heart. The grandfather and grandson both saw his abnormal reaction, and followed his gaze down the mountain. They did not find anything out of place. Mu Yuanzi's walking stick suddenly slammed into the ground, causing the entire mountain to shake. He shouted in a low voice, Are you trying to play the fool and avoid answering? Yu Qianqiu's figure shook, and he hurriedly cupped his hands and said with a bitter smile, Senior, you've misunderstood me. I haven't cultivated any wood attribute cultivation technique. On the contrary, Senior's warning just now has enlightened me, and I've gained some comprehension. Perhaps I really can cultivate a wood attribute cultivation technique. Nonsense. Mu Yuanzi pointed his walking stick at Lu Er and said, if you did not cultivate a wood secret art, how could you have smelled the fragrance on Lu Er's body? You actually dare to play such a small trick on this old man's head. If not for the fact that you saved Lu Er, you crafty scoundrel would have already lost your life under this old man's walking stick. Yu Qianqiu was confused by him. He felt that this old man was relying on his high cultivation to be unreasonable. He was both angry and amused as he said, what does whether I cultivate a wood secret art or not have to do with being able to smell the fragrance on Lu Er's body? These are completely unrelated matters. Senior must drag it into this. Aren't you taking advantage of your power to bully others? Taking advantage of your power to bully others? What an ignorant junior. You actually dare to boast shamelessly in front of this old man. Mu Yuanzi's aura changed and directly pressed down on Yu Qianqiu with an unstoppable force. Lu Er turned pale with fright and stood in front of Yu Qianqiu with a whoosh. She looked at Mu Yuanzi and pleaded, Grandpa, get out of my way. Mu Yuanzi shouted with an imposing manner. If I want to kill him, can you stop me? Yu Qianqiu was already prepared to run away. At this point, he also did not intend to endure it anymore. He immediately shouted angrily, Old man Mu, killing someone is just a matter of nodding your head to the ground. If you want to kill me, just say so. There's no need to splash dirty water on me. Damn it. You disrespectful old thing. And you still have the guts to shamelessly teach your granddaughter. It would be strange if you didn't teach her bad things. No wonder Lu always wants to run out. Anyone who sees a shameless old fellow like you will feel disgusted. Ah! Lu exclaimed. This was the first time she heard someone scold her grandfather like this. She hurriedly turned around and waved her hands at him. I didn't. I just want to go out and play. I don't hate grandfather at all. Mu Yuanzi was stunned on the spot. After so many years, this was the first time someone dared to speak to him like this. He was so angry that he laughed instead. No one has ever doubted my character. Good. Today, I will let you die knowing the truth. As he spoke, he waved his big sleeves, and a thick aura spread out. What followed was the same fragrance as Lu Er's body, but it was even thicker than Lu Er's. It made one feel refreshed. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't help but take a few more breaths. You smell it, right? Mu Yuanzi looked at Yu Qianqiu's reaction and sneered. Lu Er and I are the wood spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth. Our bodies are born with a kind of aura that represents life. Ordinary people can't smell it at all. Only those who cultivate wood attribute spells can smell that special fragrance. You still dare to say that you don't cultivate wood attribute spells? You still dare to say that you didn't lie to this old man? So that's how it is. But that wasn't right either. Yu Qianqiu looked at the grandfather-granddaughter duo with a face full of doubt. He scratched his head and said, I do have the possibility of cultivating wood attribute spells, but the key is that I haven't started cultivating yet. Mu Yuanzi snorted coldly and said, Don't think that I don't know what you're up to. As long as a person who cultivates wood attribute spells devours a wood spirit, not only can he possess the innate magical powers of a wood spirit, but he can also transfer the cultivation of a wood spirit to himself. If it weren't for the fact that you accidentally barged in, this old man would have beaten you to death long ago. How could you still be talking nonsense here? When Lu Er heard that Yu Qianqiu could devour a wood spirit, she was so scared that her face turned pale. She teleported behind Mu Yuanzi and poked her head out to look at Yu Qianqiu timidly. It was as if she had seen Grandmother Wolf. Seeing that this innocent little girl had also misunderstood him, Yu Qianqiu immediately said angrily, Old man Mu, if you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. If this old man really had the ability you say, or the intention you say, I would have made my move when I rescued Lu Er back to the World Chamber of Commerce. Why would I wait until now to make my move? When Lu Er heard this, she immediately nodded in agreement. She knew very well that after Yu Qianqiu saved her, he couldn't chase her away no matter what. It was she who stubbornly followed him to the World Chamber of Commerce. Moreover, those sisters in the World Chamber of Commerce were all very good to her. None of them had any ill intentions towards her. Mu Yuanzi was stunned, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was true. In the blink of an eye, his tone softened a little as he said, "Maybe you have a bigger plan. Maybe you're deliberately expressing goodwill to Lu. But in reality, you're after my cultivation." When he heard that his tone had softened, Yu Qianqiu immediately took advantage of the situation and became unforgiving. He was so angry that his face turned red, and he stomped his feet exaggeratedly as he scolded. "You unreasonable old man, why would I want you? Don't say that this old man can't find you. Even if I find you, so what? With your cultivation, it's a piece of cake for you to deal with me. Don't tell me that this old man is tired of living, so I first ran over to let you kill me, and then conspire against you? What *t logic? Who are you trying to fool?" When Lu heard this, she immediately nodded repeatedly in agreement. She didn't beat around the bush and stood on the side of whoever she felt was right. She didn't think about her grandfather at all as she walked resolutely to Yu Qianqiu's side, looking a little like she was siding with an outsider. Could it be that there was some other unknown reason why this brat could smell the fragrance on the wood spirit's body? Mu Yuanzi immediately fell silent. He was actually a person who thought highly of himself, and had always prided himself on being an otherworldly expert. Even the domineering demon god knight had to respectfully address him as senior when he saw him. These were all things that he was proud of. Could it be that he had wrongly accused someone? Although he didn't feel good in his heart, and although he also had a temperament that thought highly of himself, to be able to live peacefully in seclusion here meant that he was a person who could take things up and let them go. After a moment of silence, he resolutely said, "I'll let you go this time, but if I find out that you're trying to fool this old man in the future, even if you have to ascend to the heavens or dive into the earth, I'll make sure you die under this old man's staff." As he spoke, he was about to wave his staff to open the profound gate and let Yu Qianqiu leave. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily and raised his hand to stop him. "Let's talk about the future in the future. There's no need to be polite with an unreasonable person like you. From today onwards, we'll return to our own paths. Let's first clear up the debts that we owe in the past. From now on, we'll go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. Let's pretend we've never met before." "Oh, could it be that I owe you something?" Mu Yuanzi sneered and stood with his staff on the ground, revealing an expression that didn't know what was good for him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at Lu. He said with righteous indignation. "Back then, there were a few experts who wanted to molest Lu. It was I who risked my life to save Luer's life, and also protected Luer's innocence. How much is this debt worth? How should this debt be settled?" Chapter 11:18. Luer was stunned on the spot as she recalled the situation back then. She didn't know whether those people who bullied her were experts or not, but she didn't see how much danger Yu Qianqiu had risked to save her. It seemed like he had scared those people away the moment he appeared. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with some grievance and pouted. Hearing Yu Qianqiu's words, it seemed like he wanted to draw a line between them. Mu Yuanzi choked for a moment. He didn't expect this fellow to act like a scoundrel, asking for a reward after doing a good deed. He was too tasteless. However, in all these years, only others owed him Mu Yuanzi favors. He had never owed anyone a favor. Moreover, this person had indeed saved his granddaughter. Since he had opened his mouth, he wasn't as thick-skinned as Yu Qianqiu to deny it. This was the weakness of a person who thought highly of himself. Yu Qianqiu took advantage of this point and acted like a scoundrel. "How do you want to settle this debt? How much money do you want?" Mu Yuanzi spat out word by word. He was just short of beating someone up. Although his cultivation was high, he didn't have a single spirit stone on hand. When it came to money, he really had a headache. "Money? I am the dignified sect master of the world commerce. Do I still lack spirit stones?" Yu Qianqiu said with a face full of disdain. I, Yu Qianqiu, have always been a straightforward and upright person. I won't beat around the bush. I am about to cultivate a set of wood attribute spells. Your wood ocean of massacre is beneficial to my cultivation. I want to borrow your precious land to cultivate in seclusion. After this, the grudges between us will be settled. How about it? Mu Yuanzi's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect that this person would dare to say he wanted to cultivate a wood attribute spell in front of him. Moreover, he wanted to do it right under his nose. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was extremely daring. After staring at Yu Qianqiu for a while, he stopped looking at him and turned around to face the vast sea of Mu Sha with his walking stick and said slowly, 1 year. I'll give you 1 year's time. I don't care how long you need to go into seclusion. Once the 1-year period is over, you must immediately scram out of the Wood Killer Sea. After that, you're not allowed to meet Luer again. Otherwise, I'll make sure you die. These words meant that he had agreed to Yu Qianqiu, but he added another condition. Grandpa, Luer called out, feeling wronged. Then, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook her head repeatedly, signaling him not to agree. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, turned his head away guiltily, pretending not to see anything. Judging from his past experience, he reckoned that it would not take more than a year to practice the wood secret art. He then shouted, Fine. It's a deal. After hearing the reply, Mu Yuanzi let out a cold snort. Ignoring Luer, his figure flashed and he disappeared from the mountain peak. He was not afraid that Yu Qianqiu would cause any trouble in the Wood Killer Sea, because if something happened, Yu Qianqiu would have nowhere to run even if he wanted to. This was his territory. As long as he did not open the Gate of Wonders, taking care of Yu Qianqiu would be a piece of cake. Under the ancient language tree at the mountain peak, Luer buried her head to the side with a depressed expression, not making a sound. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose helplessly, coughed and said, Luer, where are your parents? It's my first time here, so I should pay them a visit. Luer is a wood spirit, how could I have parents? Luer lowered her head and muttered softly. Yu Qianqiu made an oh sound when he heard this. Then he turned to a relaxed smile and said, Luer, are you angry at me? Luer did not make a sound, indicating her tacit agreement. Yu Qianqiu helplessly smiled bitterly. With a hint of a fawning tone, he half coaxed and half begged. Luer, I want to choose a place to cultivate. Can you bring me around the Wood Killer Sea to look around? The little lass was soft-hearted and could not resist coaxing. She only hesitated for a short while before revealing a reluctant expression. She pouted and said, What's so good about the Wood Killer Sea? It's the same everywhere. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and waved his hand to retrieve the 2 swords with the grilled fish stuck in them. He directly floated in the air. When Luer also flew up, he looked around and asked, Where do you and your grandfather usually live? Luer heard this and flew into the distance without a word. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he followed. Flying over a small plain in a valley, he saw a towering tree that had fallen to the ground and bloomed. The lush canopy covered an area of several miles. There were many egrets nesting on the canopy, and on the plain grassland that was enshrouded in white mist, there were many bison coming and going in groups. It was a natural and beautiful scene. Yu Qianqiu did not know why the little lass brought him here, but he saw Luer point at the tree on the plain and say, There is a hole in the tree trunk that spirals upwards. It's a natural residence, and it's very spacious. Grandfather and I live in there. Oh. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He thought that it was naturally no problem for people to live in such a large tree trunk, so he asked, You said that the people in the Wood Killer Sea always let you play mahjong. Are there other people living in the treehouse? Only grandfather and I live in the treehouse. Other people do not dare to come here and disturb grandfather. Luer waved her hand and pointed at the vast Wood Killer Sea and said, They are scattered in the forest in all directions to practice. When I want to play mahjong, I will sneak into the forest to find them. Yu Qianqiu replied with an oh. He wanted to visit the treehouse to see what it was like. However, he thought that Old Man Mu did not like him, and that going there would only be a thrill, so he dismissed the idea. He looked around and sighed. I'd better find a place to practice in seclusion. Luer did not object, and the two went straight to the west one after another. Looking down from the sky, the terrain of the entire Woodkiller Sea was very simple. There were hills, mountains, plains, lakes, and rivers. The ground was mostly covered with green vegetation. There were no deserts, no Gobi, no seas, and no snowfields. It was a planet with green vegetation, and it was not without reason that it was named Woodkiller Sea. The area of this green planet was not big. It was at most 1/10 of the size of the human world that Yuqiancho was in. The two flew and stopped for less than a day, and they had already circled the Woodkiller Sea once and flew to the sky above the ancient language tree. There was nothing to be picky about here if he wanted to practice in seclusion. Finally, Yuqiancho pointed to a dense forest that was enshrouded in white fog and asked, "There won't be any problems if I go to that forest to practice in seclusion, right? I'll go greet them. They won't disturb you." Luer, who was in a much better mood, flew down first, and Yuqiancho followed closely behind. The them that Luer referred to were actually some of the plant demons in the forest. They were all dressed in strange attire, and when they saw Luer, they were very respectful. Luer told them the purpose of Yuqiancho's visit, and the group of plant demons immediately obeyed. It was as if Luer was their master. After the plant demons memorized Yuqiancho's appearance, they all disappeared into the forest, and the silent Yuqiancho impatiently sat cross-legged in the dense fog of the forest. Seeing that he entered the state so quickly, Luer pouted unhappily. She was blaming him for burning the bridge after crossing it. Little did she know that when Yuqiancho descended into this dense forest that was enshrouded in spiritual fog, the nerves in his brain immediately twitched, and the vast star map in his brain was immediately activated. However, seeing that there were many living people present, he had no choice but to resist. When all the living people left, he immediately sat cross-legged and entered the state, afraid that he would miss the opportunity to comprehend the wood art. Although Luer was a little unhappy, she didn't dare to disturb him. She quietly floated a few miles away, but she didn't go too far. Moreover, she would often sneak back to observe Yuqiancho's movements. The forest was quiet, and the dense fog drifted. Yuqiancho, who was sitting cross-legged, was faintly discernible in the fog, like an old monk in meditation, not moving at all. After a few days, his eyebrows gradually locked together, as if he had encountered something he couldn't figure out. Luer, who had been secretly observing him, was very curious. She didn't know what kind of heart demon he had encountered in the process of cultivation that he couldn't resolve, so she flew and sat on the trunk of an ancient tree not far from Yuqiancho, and continued to secretly observe Yuqiancho. After another half a month, Yuqiancho's tightly locked eyebrows finally began to gradually relax, as if he had already found a solution to the problem. He was here in seclusion to comprehend the wood art. Outside in the ancient forest, the great bright will was becoming more and more anxious under the ancient language tree. The fish no longer had the mood to continue roasting, but it couldn't find a better solution, so it could only wait anxiously under the ancient language tree. However, the others, led by Jin Tai and Bai Qi, were still unwilling to give up. They continued to search in the ancient forest, and they had almost searched the entire ancient forest. In the blink of an eye, a month's time quickly passed. Luer, who felt that it was somewhat dull, gradually lost her patience. She was currently lying on the trunk of the tree with her hands supporting her chin, and her legs hooking and kicking as she watched two praying mantises fight. Just as the two little insects were entangled and biting each other, a strange throbbing suddenly spread out from under the tree. The movements of the two biting insects froze, as if they had also sensed that something was amiss. Luer looked down the tree with some surprise. She saw that the mist around Yuqiancho was spreading out in all directions like ripples. Not long after, the mist in this area of the forest was completely dispersed without a trace. Luer, who was feeling strange, suddenly stood up. She turned her head left and right to look in all directions, and a strange green splendor appeared in her eyes. She immediately discovered that the surrounding trees and vines were continuously emitting indiscernible specks of green light. They scattered and fluttered towards Yuqiancho's body and gathered on his body. At first, it was just specks of green light probing. Then it developed into patches. The specks of green light swarmed into the pores all over Yuqiancho's body. He's absorbing the wood element. Luer cried out in shock. Then, she quickly covered her mouth, afraid that she would disturb Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. However, it didn't take long before Lu'er felt afraid. The specks of green light of the wood element were pouring out of the trees in all directions at a terrifying speed, gathering on the cross-legged sitting Yu Qianqiu's body in an endless stream. Those ancient trees that had grown for hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, as well as the vines on the ground, were all withering at a visible speed. Chapter 11:19. Once these vibrant vines and trees lost the support of the wood element in their bodies, they would wither like rotten wood. But how could Yu Qianqiu care about this? He had just successfully cultivated the wood art, and his body was extremely comfortable. He needed to familiarize himself with the wood art, and absorb the wood element to form a crystal core in his dantian. How could he care about the life and death of these plants? As he became more and more proficient with the wood art, the speed at which he absorbed the wood element also became faster and faster. The endless cyan light began to converge into a flood, rolling in from all directions. The withering speed of the surrounding flowers and trees immediately increased. The fresh flowers lost their vibrant colors, the grass lost its green color and turned yellow, and the ancient, towering trees quickly lost their luster. If one looked down from the sky, they would see a brownish-yellow disk in the dense forest expanding at a visible speed. This vibrant forest was quickly losing its vitality. What made Lu'er terrified was that as the suction force from Yu Qianqiu's body grew stronger, the wood element in her body would also rapidly flow away if she did not suppress it. It would converge into the surging cyan flood, and be absorbed into Yu Qianqiu's body. Those plant monsters that she had persuaded to leave were also frightened. The wood element supporting their bodies was rapidly flowing away. Thus, they could no longer hide and rushed back from all directions. They were all frightened after seeing what Yu Qianqiu was doing. He was simply exterminating all the plants in this forest. The plant monsters' trembling gazes shifted to Lu'er, who was standing on the dead tree. After everyone secretly communicated, they sent out their elders. A seemingly trembling old man leaped onto the branch of the dead tree, and repeatedly bowed to Lu'er. "Miss, quickly stop him. Otherwise, everyone will not be able to survive." Yu Qianqiu had already mastered the wood art, and could split his attention to his surroundings. After all, this was not an absolutely safe place, so he had to be careful and vigilant. In reality, he had already heard the old man's complaints, but he pretended not to know. He was at the crucial moment of condensing the wood art crystal core, so how could he stop midway? He continued to do what he was doing. Lu'er, who had regained her senses, looked at her surroundings and said hurriedly, "You guys quickly go back and defend your main bodies." Everyone didn't even have the time to thank him. They immediately dispersed and flew in all directions, quickly merging into their own bodies. The wood element that protected their bodies stopped leaking. Thus, in the gradually expanding brownish-yellow disk in the dense forest, some sporadic discordant green appeared. In the center of the wood killer sea, in the hollow belly of an ancient tree on a valley plain, a stream of light shot into the sky. Mu Yuanzi was floating in the air. He had also sensed the abnormal activity in the wood massacre sea. He looked at the expanding brown circle of death in bewilderment, and was immediately shocked. He turned into a streak of light and shot over. As soon as he flew over, he could easily see Yu Qianqiu sitting cross-legged. The dense leaves covering Yu Qianqiu had withered and died. The greenwood element that was gathering from all directions was crazily pouring into Yu Qianqiu's body. Almost all the plants within a radius of 10 miles had died. Mu Yuanzi immediately shouted angrily, "How dare you? Stop at once!" Upon hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He was afraid that the old man would stop, so he hurriedly shouted angrily, "Senior Mu, you promised to let me cultivate in seclusion in the wood massacre sea for a year. Are you going to go back on your word?" Although he had opened his eyes to speak, he didn't stop absorbing the wood element. Mu Yuanzi had already scurried down. He glared at Lu'er, as if blaming her for not stopping him. Then he stared at Yu Qianqiu and said sternly, "If you don't stop, don't blame me for forcefully interrupting your cultivation and causing you to suffer from qi deviation. Old man Mu, you're going back on your word. You're going too far." Yu Qianqiu was a little anxious and scolded him on the spot. I promised you to cultivate in the wood massacre sea, but I didn't allow you to forcefully absorb the wood element in my wood massacre sea. Mu Yuanzi shouted angrily. He raised the wooden staff in his hand and slashed it in all directions with an imposing manner as sharp as a knife. It immediately cut off Yu Qianqiu's absorption of the wood element in the wood massacre sea. The torrential current that had lost its destination quickly flowed towards the head of the wooden staff in Mu Yuanzi's hand. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed drastically. Seeing that this old man had ruined his plan, he was so angry that he was about to use all his strength to destroy the wood massacre sea as revenge. But suddenly he was startled. Then, a joyful expression appeared on his face and he quickly closed his eyes. Yu Qianqiu's dantian shook fiercely. He sent his divine sense into his dantian to take a look. He saw that there was another crystal core shining with a blue light in his dantian. It formed a circle with the red crystal core representing the fire art, the black crystal core representing the water art, the white crystal core representing the gold art, and the yellow crystal core representing the earth art. Yu Qianqiu was immediately overjoyed. He didn't expect that the green crystal core that represented the wood art would actually condense at the critical moment when the wood element was cut off. The heavens were really on his side. This meant that he had truly mastered the wood art. He couldn't be bothered to bicker with that old man anymore. Lu'er looked weakly at her grandfather. Mu Yuanzi's anger had yet to dissipate, and his eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Yu Qianqiu. Lu'er was secretly alarmed and anxious. Mu Yuanzi had seen people who cultivated the wood art before, but this was the first time he had seen someone who could absorb the wood element. This was equivalent to grasping the source of the wood art. He faintly sensed that the wood art that Yu Qianqiu cultivated was not simple. One mistake would most likely lead to a disaster for the plants and trees of the three realms. Should he keep this kid? Or should he kill him or not? Mu Yuanzi's expression was dark and gloomy, and he was having a great battle in his heart. On one hand, he felt that keeping Yu Qianqiu alive would be a disaster for the plants and trees of the three realms. On the other hand, if he killed Yu Qianqiu, he who had always been aloof and virtuous, would not be able to accept it. After struggling for a while, Mu Yuanzi forcefully suppressed his killing intent. He had promised to let the other party enter seclusion for a year, but he killed him while he was cultivating. Mu Yuanzi could not bring himself to do such a thing. The main reason was that he did not want the integrity that he had upheld for so many years to be destroyed by a mere Yu Qianqiu. On the other hand, he was not afraid of what Yu Qianqiu could do. Even if Yu Qianqiu did something out of line, he was confident that he could get rid of this scourge at any time. After all, the difference in cultivation between the two of them was too great. Seeing that the killing intent in her grandfather's eyes had disappeared, Lu'er immediately heaved a sigh of relief. As for Yu Qianqiu, there was a huge change in his dantian. He did not have the energy to care too much about it. He quickly opened his eyes and looked at Mu Yuanzi. Seeing that the other party was no longer pursuing the matter, he also heaved a sigh of relief. The 10 nascent souls in his dantian had merged into one when his cultivation broke through to the early stage minor immortal realm, becoming 9. At this moment, the 5 colored crystal cores that represented the 5 elements art had already been arranged. They were rapidly revolving around the 9 nascent souls that were sitting cross-legged. Winds and clouds surged in Yu Qianqiu's dantian. This was not the first time he had experienced this kind of situation, and he immediately understood that his cultivation was about to break through. What he needed to do now was already very experienced. A storage bracelet containing 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones appeared on his wrist, and 2 handfuls of divine-grade spirit stones were already in his hands. Mu Yuanzi and Lu'er exchanged a glance, unable to figure out what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. When they turned around, they discovered that the 2 handfuls of divine-grade spirit stones in Yu Qianqiu's hands had their spiritual energy sucked dry, turning from black to grayish-white. Even Yu Qianqiu himself seemed to be frightened by his own actions. Although his eyes were closed, the muscles on his face twitched violently. The dried-up spirit stones in his hands fell to the ground with a huala sound, and 2 more handfuls of divine-grade spirit stones appeared in Yu Qianqiu's hands. However, it felt like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. With 2 handfuls of spirit stones in his hands, the spiritual energy was sucked dry in a breath's time. Even after grabbing more than a dozen handfuls of spirit stones, he still felt that it was too slow. Fortunately, he had already forged his immortal physique. If it was in the past, his meridians wouldn't have been able to withstand such an overload of spiritual energy. All of a sudden, Yu Qianqiu's arms moved, and the ground caved in, forming a deep funnel. Yu Qianqiu was sitting in the center of the funnel. The grandfather and grandson duo were confused as to what Yu Qianqiu was doing, but the storage bracelet on Yu Qianqiu's wrist emitted a series of rattling noises. Black spirit stones gushed out like a fountain, filling up the entire funnel in an instant, burying Yu Qianqiu inside. "Grandfather, what is he doing?" Lu'er couldn't help asking curiously. Mu Yuanzi had also forgotten about the previous matter. His eyes were filled with doubt as he shook his head and said, "It seems like he is absorbing the spiritual energy from the spirit stones to cultivate. But how can his body endure absorbing so much spiritual energy in such a short period of time? I have also never seen such a thing before. We'll know if we continue watching." Lu'er nodded and said, "Oh, how could the grandfather and grandson duo know that the 5 crystal cores in Yu Qianqiu's dantian were spinning rapidly? It was like a bottomless black hole. No matter how much spiritual energy there was, it would still be sucked in without any resistance. If Yu Qianqiu didn't use spiritual energy to fill up his dantian, then even his intestines, heart, and lungs would be sucked in." In less than a moment, the large amount of black spirit stones that were burying Yu Qianqiu in the funnel gradually turned grayish-white. Almost at the same time that the large amount of spiritual energy in the spirit stones was exhausted, there was a crashing sound as the grayish-white spirit stones all flowed out from the bottom of the funnel. They saw a large, black hole appear at the bottom of the funnel under Yu Qianqiu's butt. After all the dried-up spirit stones were drained, the black hole quickly healed. The storage bracelet on Yu Qianqiu's wrist once again spewed out a large amount of spirit stones to bury himself. The grandfather and grandson duo were dumbstruck. They discovered that using this method to absorb the spiritual energy in the spirit stones was indeed very fast. Mu Yuanzi was truly speechless. He suddenly felt that he had lived all these years in vain. In the past, he had always thought that he was experienced and knowledgeable. However, today Yu Qianqiu had truly broadened his horizons. Not to mention anything else, there was actually someone who felt that the speed at which he absorbed spiritual energy was too slow. Thus, he used spirit stones to bury himself in a large funnel to save himself the trouble. Chapter 11:20. What surprised him even more was that even though Yu Qianqiu had cast a technique to create such a large hole in the ground, with his cultivation, he actually didn't notice much movement. This scene caused Mu Yuanzi's pupils to shrink, and his eyelids to twitch. As time passed, the spirit stones in the underground funnel were constantly replaced. Spirit stones were continuously consumed, and there were no signs of it stopping. The grandfather and grandson duo kept watching from the side. And the more they watched, the more shocked they became. Nearly 100 spirit stones had been consumed just like that. Let alone Mu Yuanzi, even Lu'er could see that it was impossible for a person's body to contain such a large amount of spiritual energy. After 100 or so spirit stones, the grandfather and grandson duo, who were gradually getting used to this, suddenly realized that the spirit stones that had been sucked dry were not replaced in time. The grandfather and grandson duo's gazes immediately focused on the inside of the funnel. Mu Yuanzi even released his divine sense into the pile of dried-up spirit stones to investigate. One day later, all the spirit stones in the funnel suddenly flowed into the ground, and the funnel that was sunken into the ground slowly bulged up. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing in the center of the funnel, also rose up. The ground under his feet became flat again, as if nothing had happened. Lu'er's eyes blinked, and she looked curiously at Yu Qianqiu. Mu Yuanzi looked at the smiling Yu Qianqiu and sized him up. Suddenly, his expression shook, and he cried out involuntarily, "You directly advance from the initial stage of minor immortal to the initial stage of exalted immortal?" Lu'er couldn't help but let out an ah when she heard this. Yu Qianqiu was in high spirits. and his face was beaming with joy. He chuckled and cupped his hands at the two, saying, "This is all thanks to Senior's feng shui treasured land." Mu Yuanzi's eyes were filled with bewilderment, but they gradually returned to normal. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "You also know how to control the earth attribute." Yu Qianqiu was startled, and he knew he couldn't hide it anymore, so he said perfunctorily, "I know a thing or two." Mu Yuanzi slowly turned around, and after a moment of silence he looked back at Yu Qianqiu and said indifferently, "I don't care what secrets you're hiding. This old man hopes that you remember what you said. After a year, scram out of Wood Killer Sea, and never meet Luer again." Yu Qianqiu was startled, and the joy on his face disappeared without a trace. He then snorted coldly, "I, Yu Qianqiu, am a man of my word. I never go back on my word, unlike some people who don't keep their word." There was a hidden meaning in his words, hinting that Mu Yuanzi had forcefully interrupted his cultivation. Mu Yuanzi wasn't an idiot. How could he not understand the meaning behind Mu Yuanzi's words? Mu Yuanzi didn't make a fuss. He stabbed the wooden staff in his hand into the ground, and a thin layer of azure light immediately enveloped the large head of the staff. The azure light rushed along the body of the staff, and when it reached the ground, it quickly spread out like ripples, rushing into the dense forest in all directions. What a dense wood attribute, so dense that it could be seen with the naked eye. Yu Qianqiu was inwardly shocked. He saw that wherever the green light spread, the withered flowers and grass on the ground immediately regained their vitality. The withered trees in the surroundings also sprouted, and new lush green leaves grew at a visible rate. Looking down from the sky, one could see a green ripple appear in the center of the withered forest, and then it quickly spread to the entire withered forest. Not long after, it regained its vitality, and the fresh green was even more eye-catching than the surrounding forest. Mu Yuanzi flew into the sky from the center of the new green, and swept his eyes across the surroundings. Then he turned into a stream of light and flew into the distance. The legendary withered tree coming back to life. Yu Qianqiu was flabbergasted as he looked at his surroundings. These words suddenly popped up in his mind. When he came back to his senses, he discovered that Mu Yuanzi had already left, and only Lu was looking at him curiously. Yu Qianqiu looked at his hands, and his right hand suddenly condensed into a claw that covered a newly grown green vine not far away. The small green vine shook violently for a moment, and then it quickly grew, growing longer and thicker at a visible rate. It coiled around a large tree, and as it grew, the plants in a small area around it slowly withered, as if all their energy had been sucked dry by the growth of this long vine. The condensed 5 claws suddenly clenched, and the thick vine that had turned from a new vine to an old vine suddenly tightened around the trunk of the large tree. It tightened even more, and the vine sank into the tree trunk. "What are you trying to do?" Just as Lu asked weakly, she heard several snapping sounds. The vine that was coiled around the tree trunk could not withstand the great force, and actually broke into several pieces. Other than leaving a few deep marks on the tree trunk, it was not a big deal. Yu Qianqiu turned a deaf ear to Luer's words. His clenched fist once again turned into a claw, and the thick vine that had broken into several pieces violently shook and grew again. However, before it could recover to half its original length, it stopped growing. No matter how Yu Qianqiu used the wood art to speed up its growth, it could not grow again. He saw that the ground around the vine had turned yellow, as if all the nutrients on the ground had been sucked dry by it. The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched, and he looked around. He suddenly opened his arms, and a fresh and clean aura surged out from his body. The surrounding vines and grass were like long snakes that had awakened, spreading and growing wildly. When they reached a certain size, they stopped. As Yu Qianqiu's arms came together, the surrounding vines whooshed over, wrapping him like a dumpling in the blink of an eye. Inside the dumpling, Yu Qianqiu spread his arms. Snapping sounds rang out, and all the vines wrapping around him exploded into pieces, scattering all over the ground. How is this possible? How is this possible? Yu Qianqiu looked like he was possessed, muttering to himself in a daze. Then he quickly checked the storage bracelet on his wrist. The 10 spaces inside originally contained 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones, but now one of the spaces was completely emptied. In other words, he had spent a total of 1 billion divine-grade spirit stones to advance his cultivation from early minor immortal to early heavenly immortal. Seeing his dazed appearance, Lu'er once again asked weakly, "Yu Qianqiu, what happened to you?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up, as if he had discovered a new continent. He directly teleported to Lu'er's side, holding her shoulders with both hands, shaking her. "Lu, aren't you a wood spirit? You and your grandfather should be proficient in wood element spells, right? Are there any killing moves among the wood element spells that are more powerful? Can you show it to me?" The reason why he lost his composure was because he felt that the wood element was too weak. He almost couldn't believe it. The wood element was the one that took the longest time, and was the most difficult to cultivate. Its power shouldn't be this weak. He thought of the earth element, which wasn't very powerful, and couldn't help but have a strange feeling. Could it be that the easier it was to cultivate, the stronger it was, and the harder it was to cultivate, the weaker it was? This didn't make sense. He guessed that he had just learned it, and had yet to comprehend its profoundness, so he asked Lu'er to clear his doubts. Lu'er hummed like an obedient baby. Yu Qianqiu smiled flatteringly, and quickly let go of her shoulders. He saw Lu'er look around, and then flashed to a small yellow flower not far away. She stretched out a finger and pointed at the flower. The flower quickly sped up, and as the petals withered, it had already produced a mature fruit. Flower seed. Lu'er quickly plucked it and flashed back to Yu Qianqiu. She plucked a brown sesame-sized flower seed from a bunch of flower seeds, and casually threw the rest away. That small flower seed was placed in the center of her delicate palm, and she spread it in front of Yu Qianqiu, saying, "Look carefully." And Yu Qianqiu nodded his head, his eyes wide open. He stared at that sesame-sized flower seed, and held his breath in concentration. In his heart, he wondered what kind of powerful killing move such a tiny little fellow could unleash. But on second thought, as the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. The more unremarkable the little fellow was, the more unexpected it might be. Wasn't there a saying that concentrated was the essence? It must not be underestimated. Lu'er closed her eyes slightly, and her delicate palm suddenly rippled with a faint green brilliance. Not long later, like performing magic, that tiny little fellow in her palm evolved into hundreds of similar illusions. Not long after, the illusions gradually solidified, and the brilliance on her palm disappeared. Hundreds of sesame-sized brown flower seeds laid in Lu'er's palm. Did you see it? Lu'er opened her eyes, and she proudly spread out her palm. What did this mean? Yu Qianqiu's face was bewildered. He was fooled by this magic-like method. He scratched his head and stared at the hundreds of flower seeds in confusion. After looking for a while, he still couldn't see any powerful killing move. He thought to himself, could it be that these little fellows could explode like an atomic bomb? He raised his head hesitantly and asked, "Lu'er, don't look down on their small size. Grandpa said that no matter if it's us wood spirits or those wood cultivators, only those who can master this move have truly grasped the true essence of the wood attribute spell. I spent many years to learn it." Lu'er warned him very seriously. Yu Qianqiu's face immediately turned solemn, and he thought to himself, oh my, the true essence of the wood attribute spell. As expected, the powerful ones are still to come. He nodded repeatedly and said, "Don't worry about this. I, Yu Qianqiu, am not an ignorant person who looks down on others. Continue, I will definitely learn humbly. Since you can absorb the wood element, that means you can also learn this move." As Lu'er spoke, she waved her hand like a fairy scattering flowers. Hundreds of sesame-sized brown flower seeds were scattered into the forest. Immediately after, new green buds sprouted from the ground at a visible speed, slowly growing into a plant. The flower buds also rapidly bloomed on the branches. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of newly sprouted yellow flowers swayed in the forest with a fresh fragrance. It was very pleasing to the eye. Yu Qianqiu foolishly looked at the yellow flowers without blinking, waiting for the subsequent explosion of power. He was even considering if he should move further away to watch in case he was accidentally injured. Who knew that after waiting for a while, there would be no reaction? Tilting his head to look, he saw Lu'er proudly standing there with her hands behind her back, looking like she was waiting for his praise. Yu Qianqiu swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He asked in a somewhat incredulous and trembling voice, Lu, it's over? Yeah. Don't tell me you want to watch it again? Lua revealed a look of indifference. She turned around and found the cluster of flower seeds that she had previously thrown away. Then, she peeled off a sesame seed and placed it on her palm. She extended her hand in front of Yu Qianqiu and said, I'll demonstrate it one more time, but there won't be a next time. You better watch carefully. Chapter 11:21. It's over. I've failed miserably in a simple task today. As expected, the more harmless something seemed, the easier it was to deceive people. Yu Qianqiu immediately had difficulty breathing, his brain lacking oxygen. His face darkened as he stared at Lu and gritted his teeth. Lua, you tricked me? If they weren't in someone else's territory, he would tie her up and beat her up before saying anything else. A gentleman prefers death to humiliation. Lu'er was stunned. How did I trick you? Yu Qianqiu was exasperated and speechless as he pointed at the sesame seed on her palm and said indignantly, What kind of powerful killer move is this? Can plants kill people? You're still saying you're not tricking me? Killing people? Why would you kill people for no reason? Lu'er waved her hands fearfully. I've never learned those killing moves. Even if Grandpa told me to learn them to defend myself, I wouldn't learn them. Yu Qianqiu's embarrassment and anger disappeared. He raised his eyebrows and said, If that's the case, it's not that there aren't powerful killing moves among the wood attribute spells, but you don't know. His tone suddenly took a 360-degree turn. Like a wolf grandmother, he said patiently, Does your grandpa know a lot? He remembered that Bai Changchun once said that the 5 elements spell he cultivated was a great spell of the origin of heaven and earth. After mastering it, it would be very powerful. Even Bai Changchun himself sighed at his inferiority. But now that he had completely mastered the 5 elements spell, other than his cultivation increasing a little, he didn't find it very powerful. It was far from Old Man Bai's impressive means. He faintly felt that he had a mountain of treasures, but he didn't find the key to open it. Lu'er nodded, then quickly shook her head. Although Grandpa knows, he won't teach it to outsiders. Teach it to outsiders again? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. You mean, your grandpa once taught powerful killing moves to others? Lu'er acknowledged and said, Back then, when my spiritual consciousness was first awakened, it was nurtured in Grandpa's staff and had yet to take form. I once saw a few of Grandpa's friends coming to Wood Killer Sea from the outside world. I heard from Grandpa that their cultivations were very profound, even more powerful than Grandpa's. One of them was said to be the #1 expert of the 3 realms, called Demonic God Knight. Demon God? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Did your grandfather impart a powerful killer move to Demon God? That's not right. Even if a normal person knew about a Wood Elementalist's killer move, they wouldn't be able to practice it. Could it be that the Fiend Celestial also knows Wood Elemental spells? Lu'er shook her head and said, No. At that time, there were many things that I didn't understand. Later on, I heard from Grandpa that Demon God Knight had many experts under him. One of them was called Demon King Clear Sky, who was also a wood cultivator. Demon God Knight once asked Grandpa for a set of spells suitable for wood cultivators for that subordinate of his. Grandpa wanted to show off that his abilities weren't bad, so he gave Demon God Knight a set of green devil seed cultivation spells. Later on, when the 3 realms were in chaos, Demon God Knight went berserk and led his subordinates to massacre the 3 realms. Only then did Grandpa know that he had caused trouble. This matter made Grandpa very vexed, and from then on he didn't easily impart spells anymore. Green Devil Seed? Is that a very powerful killer move? Yu Qianqiu licked his lips covetously. Grandpa said that once the Green Devil Seed is injected into the human body, it will silently take root and sprout in the human body. The person won't be able to detect it at all. After it completely takes over the body, it will start to take effect, and the entire person will turn green. Under the control of the caster, they will become a wood puppet. The scariest thing is that the person under the spell is clearly conscious, but their own body will no longer have the slightest connection with them. No matter how high their cultivation is, they won't be able to control themselves. They can only watch helplessly as they do things that they don't want to do, suffering mental torture. Lu'er said with some horror. Why was it somewhat similar to Yan Juexing's demon eye ecstasy? However, the torture that made one's consciousness remain conscious was even more vicious. Yu Qianqiu pondered and said with a frown, "Is there no way to break it?" "There is." Lu'er nodded and said, "Grandpa said that anyone who cultivates this art can break it. However, the prerequisite is that their cultivation is higher than the caster. Other than that, there is no other way to break it." Back then, when Grandpa learned that Demon God Knight's subordinate, the Clear Sky Great Demon King, used this art to wreak havoc in the three realms, he personally went to find Demon God Knight to denounce him. Demon God Knight made that Clear Sky Great Demon King stop using this art. After that, Demon God went to the God Realm, and the Demon Realm was sealed, so this art never appeared in the three realms again. F***CK. One's cultivation needs to be higher than the caster, and one has to cultivate this art to be able to break it. That Clear Sky Great Demon King was able to follow Demon God, so his cultivation must be extraordinary. Then other than him, who else can break it? Yu Qianqiu said in shock. There's also Grandpa. Lu'er shook her head and said, as for whether there are others who can break it, even Grandpa didn't discover it. Looks like it is indeed more vicious than Demon Eye Ecstasy. At least, Demon Eye Ecstasy is not difficult to break. Yu Qianqiu was secretly shocked, and faintly worried that that bullshit Clear Sky Great Demon King would run out from the demon realm again. However, after thinking about it, he felt that the possibility was not too high, and he was worrying too much. He rubbed his hands and asked, "Are there any other powerful killing moves among the wood attribute arts?" Lu'er finally became alert, and she asked in bewilderment, "Do you really want to learn those powerful killing moves?" Having his intentions seen through, Yu Qianqiu coughed and said with a solemn expression, "I just want to understand a little more. In case I fall into someone else's hands one day, it's better to be prepared." "Even if you want to learn, Grandpa won't teach you," Lu'er said with a pout. Yu Qianqiu's expression stiffened. Thinking that it was indeed impossible for the old fellow to teach him, he couldn't help but become dispirited. Seeing that he was unhappy, Lu'er hurriedly approached and comforted him. Actually, the true strength of the wood attribute arts is not in those powerful killing moves. It doesn't matter whether you learn them or not. Yu Qianqiu's half-lidded eyelids suddenly opened, rippling with a strange splendor. His eyes glowed again, and he moved his head closer to secretly ask in a low voice, "Lu'er, could it be that there is an even more powerful secret hidden in the wood attribute arts?" Lu'er said with a slightly reminiscing expression, "I remember once I asked Grandpa how I was born into this world, and why I didn't have parents. So, Grandpa talked to me about the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth, saying that we are the wood spirits born from the essence of the universe, and that we are the most mystical and the greatest of the 5 great spirits." The most mystical and the greatest? The splendor in Yu Qianqiu's eyes became even brighter, and he asked anxiously, "What did your grandpa say?" Lu'er tilted her head and recalled. Grandpa said that after many years of comprehension, he discovered that the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth should have their own true meaning of life, and our wood spirits is the most profound, representing the most mysterious life in the universe. Therefore, the true meaning that we pursue should be the word life. If we really comprehend the profound meaning of life, we will naturally be very, very powerful. Just this? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot. He wouldn't hide somewhere and slowly comprehend for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, just for the sake of some profound meaning of life. If he did that, he would definitely go crazy. His creed was that 10,000 years was too long, and he should seize every moment. Yu Qianqiu casually asked with a lack of interest, "What is the true meaning that the other 4 spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth pursue?" The little girl didn't know how to read a person's expression, and still replied very seriously, "I also asked Grandpa about this. Grandpa said he didn't know either. But Grandpa had guessed that if anyone could comprehend all the true meanings of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth, they would very likely become immortal and reach the powerful realm of eternal life. Immortal and immortal? Yu Qianqiu thought of the fact that he had already cultivated the 5 elemental arts, and couldn't help but stare blankly. Then he snorted disdainfully. It was more like having nothing to do after eating. Just one true meaning was enough, and to spend countless years to comprehend 5 true meanings, it was more like there was something wrong with his brain. He had now completely lost interest. Just as he retracted his head that was in front of Lu Er, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise. His nostrils flared, and he stuck his head in front of Lu Er again. He sniffed a few times and looked at Lu Er strangely. "Why can't I smell the fragrance on your body anymore?" Lu Er, who was proud of herself as a teacher, had a huge change in expression when she heard this. She seemed to have thought of something and took a few steps back. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with incomparable horror and said, "Grandpa said that humans who have cultivated the wood elemental arts all desire to devour us wood spirits. Could it be that you also want to? Could it be that he couldn't smell the fragrance of the wood spirits because he had cultivated the wood elemental arts? Why was it the exact opposite of what Old Man Mu said?" This thought flashed quickly in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He looked at Lu Er, who was abnormally afraid of him, and felt a little helpless. He didn't know what to say. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu wasn't a good person at all. He really had the crooked thought of devouring Lu Er just now. When he saw that Old Man Mu was too arrogant and thought that he was trapped in the Wood Killer Sea and couldn't escape, he wanted to take the opportunity to kidnap Lu Er and bring her to Utopia, then see how he could devour her. But Yu Qianqiu wasn't completely evil. Facing the innocent, cute and innocent Lu Er, he really couldn't imagine what it would be like if he devoured her. He couldn't bear to do it. Instead, he hoped that Lu Er could be a little more evil. It would be best if she could be so evil that he wanted to kill her. Then he would be able to do evil things with a clear conscience. Lu, don't worry, I'm a good person. I won't do those kinds of things that bad people do." Yu Qianqiu had a bitter smile on his face as he was defeated by Lu Er. Now he had his eyes on Mu Yuanzi, but Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was too high. It was not something he could deal with his current cultivation. "Really?" Lu Er asked a little timidly. "Sigh. Whether you believe me or not, I'm going to leave the Wood Killer Sea anyway." "You don't have to worry." Yu Qianqiu looked around. He really couldn't stay any longer. It wasn't that he didn't want to continue staying in the Wood Killer Sea to think of a way to steal the killer moves related to the wood elemental arts, but he had unknowingly stayed here for almost 2 months while cultivating. He didn't know what the situation outside was like, and he was really worried that something would happen to the Daming Wheel. Chapter 11:22. "Ah, you're leaving already?" Lu Er immediately forgot her fear, and her eyes revealed an expression of wanting him to stay. She said, "Grandfather promised to let you go into seclusion in Wood Killer Sea for a year. There's still a lot of time." Yu Qianqiu did not answer her question. He looked at her and said with a faint smile, "Lu Er, listen to your grandfather. Don't sneak out anymore. The outside world is really not suitable for you." Lu Er was stunned on the spot, not knowing what was going on. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at her, who was in a daze, and said decisively, "Bring me to your grandfather. Let your grandfather send me out." Lu Er hesitated for a while, as though she didn't want Yu Qianqiu to leave so quickly. Yu Qianqiu immediately smiled and said, "If you don't bring me, I'll go by myself." After saying that, he flashed into the air and looked down. Not only was Lu Er in the forest below, there was also a small silver ball buried with the dried-up spirit stones. The dilly-dallying Lu Er immediately chased after him and asked, "Are you really not going to see me again in the future?" Yu Qianqiu didn't pay attention to her. Instead, he increased his speed and flew far away. Lu Er's early-stage minor immortal cultivation couldn't catch up to him, but she gritted her teeth and increased her speed. Luckily, the plain where the treehouse was located was not far away. 2 streams of light, one in front and one behind, zigzagged down from the sky. They flew past the treetop in the plain, landing under the tree one after the other. The ancient tree had grown for who knew how many years. It gave off a simple and unadorned feeling. The hollow roots of the tree were in a tripod state. 3 sides were ventilated. The old roots were strong and the thin roots were coiled. It could be seen that the space inside the trunk was not small. Yu Qianqiu stood outside and didn't go in. He said in a clear voice, "Senior Mu, please open the mystic door and let Junior leave Wood Killer see." As soon as he finished speaking, Mu Yuanzi appeared under the hollow tree with a walking stick. He looked down at Yu Qianqiu for a while and said indifferently, "You want to leave on your own? I didn't force you to leave. You better remember what you promised me. Just remember it." Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists. "I am a man of my word. Please open the profound gate." Without another word, Mu Yuanzi pointed his cane forward, and a wall of profound light immediately appeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was just about to enter when Lu Er suddenly shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, help me send my regards to elder sister Furong and the rest. Tell them that I miss them, and tell them not to forget Lu Er. Lu Er will accompany them to play mahjong when there's a chance." As she spoke, large drops of tears flowed down her cheeks. Mu Yuanzi glanced at her, and closed his eyes. This time he didn't reprimand her like he usually did. Yu Qianqiu only paused in his footsteps, and listened to her words expressionlessly. In the end he didn't even turn his head. He let Lu Er cry her heart out and walked forward with large steps. His figure disappeared along with the wall of profound light. The moment Yu Qianqiu stepped into the wall of profound light, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. He saw the exposed red cliff and the ancient language tree with golden leaves. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to the place he left. Even though he had experienced this once before, it still felt like a dream. Looking back, the wall of profound light had already disappeared. "Where did you go?" Suddenly someone spoke. Yu Qianqiu jumped in fright. He raised his head and saw De Mingluan standing on the branch of the ancient language tree looking at him. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and said, "I didn't expect you to still be here. If I couldn't find you, how would I explain to Wei Chuanxiu and the rest?" De Mingluan flashed down from the tree and said with a frown, "If I didn't guess wrong, you should have gone to Wood Killer see." Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and looked around. "Jintai and the rest still haven't moved? Did anything happen? They should still be searching everywhere. This is the last thing Jintai and the rest rely on to make a comeback. They won't let it go if they don't find it. Otherwise, they will definitely summon us." After De Mingluan finished, he asked, "What happened to Wood Killer see? How did you get involved all of a sudden?" "This isn't the place to talk about this. I'll slowly tell you when we get back." Yu Qianqiu looked around and saw that there was no one around. He casually took out the human skin mask and put it on his face. Previously, when he was roasting the fish, he was afraid that the smoke and fire would cause the mask to change color, making it inconvenient to use in the future, so he took it off. Now that the matter wasn't over, he still had to wear it and continue pretending to be awesome. Just as he finished dressing up, the two of them were startled at the same time. They quickly took out the communication jade talismans that Jintai had distributed to everyone. The two of them held the jade talismans for a while, and looked at each other in dismay. They then crushed the jade talismans in unison. After doing this, Yu Qianqiu sneered. "That madman Jintai really dared to do this. It's not surprising. He has always been an extreme person. To achieve his goals, he would do anything." De Mingluan frowned and said, "Are we really going to do as he said?" It turned out that the two of them had just received a message from Jintai. Jintai ordered them to immediately set fire to their respective locations in the ancient forest. Moreover, the requirement was to set the fire. Those who disobeyed would be killed without mercy. There was no room for discussion. If others heard this order, they would definitely be confused. Unfortunately, the two of them had heard Jintai and Bai Qi casually mention this matter, so they knew what kind of conspiracy it was. Who would listen to him? This guy only cares about himself. He doesn't care about the lives of his subordinates. Yu Qianqiu snorted disdainfully and pouted his lips. "Don't you know what kind of place this is? If we really set a few fires here, Once we alarm the grass with spirits in the ancient forest, we will incur the wrath of the masses. The taste of being beaten up by the masses will not be good. At that time, you and I will not be able to bear the consequences. The others don't know about the conspiracy and have no way out. They will most likely do as we say. De Mingluan let out a long sigh. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu fell into silence. He thought of Tai Xuxian and Qing Yang and didn't know what would happen to them. Thinking about it, he suddenly exclaimed, "What do you mean by setting fire now? Could it be that Jintai and Baiqi have already taken the risk to lure Wang Qing and the others here? Otherwise, there is no point in setting fire now." It's not impossible. The two of them saw that they couldn't find that person to help after such a long time, so they won't keep delaying. Otherwise, when Wang Qing and the others stabilize the forces in the Immortal and Netherworld, they will have spies everywhere in the Immortal and Netherworld. De Mingluan pondered for a moment, then said, "At that time, no matter where they escape to, they will inevitably be discovered by Wang Qing and the others. How can they run around like now? I'm afraid that they won't even be able to find a foothold in the three realms. So, it is very likely that Jintai and Baiqi have already taken the risk. They are just hiding it from everyone and treating everyone as chess pieces." Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement. Suddenly, his gaze stopped in the distance. He was stunned and said, "Someone has already started to do as Jintai said." De Mingluan looked back and saw a cloud of thick smoke rising in the distant sky. Not long after, the sound of a fierce battle came from that direction. Boom. The two of them were shocked by the loud sound behind them and turned around. In the distant sky, 6 snow-blue rainbow dragons shuttled between the heaven and earth. A golden flowing light with extraordinary aura and a white flowing light were fighting with each other. That was not all. A black hurricane that was like a pillar that supported the heavens swept over to help. Countless towering trees were uprooted and swept up into the clouds. They really lured Wang Qing over. That black hurricane is. De Mingluan was shocked and said, "Could it be that King Wu Feng of the Black Mountain has come?" "I'm afraid so. Looks like Jintai wants to catch both father and son in one fell swoop. So he took the risk to lure them all over." Yu Qianqiu snorted disdainfully and sneered. Suddenly, he saw many figures flying over in groups from the distant sky. It was obvious that they were not the subordinates of Jintai and Baiqi, the two bandits. Countless figures flew into the sky from the forest in all directions. Their clothes were all strange and the color was mostly green. It was obvious that they were the plant spirits of the ancient forest. For a moment, angry shouts and the sound of fierce fighting mixed together. All kinds of flowing lights exploded in the sky like fireworks. "Let's take a look first. If it doesn't work, we'll return to the Divine Ruin Realm and not play with them anymore. Go up." Yu Qianqiu shouted and took the lead to fly to the ancient language tree. De Mingluan immediately understood that it was a bit conspicuous to stand below. If they were not careful, they might be affected, so he also flashed up. The two of them hid in the dense golden leaves and watched the battle outside through the gaps. Seeing that the incomparably powerful hurricane had joined in, the two flowing lights, one gold and one white, immediately broke away from the battle with the 6 snow-blue rainbow dragons. They streaked across the sky at an unbelievable speed and escaped. "Jintai Baiqi, the two of you have lured us father and son all the way here. If you have any schemes, then use them." A loud voice came from the black hurricane and resounded through the world. It seemed to have seen through Jintai and Baiqi's scheme. However, the two of them were different from the previous times. They no longer ran and stopped, but left without turning back. With the cultivation of everyone present, it would be very difficult to catch up to the two of them. Wu Feng and Wang Qing wanted to lead the large number of people gathered from the underworld and various sects to continue the chase, but they found that they were met with great resistance. Countless grass and wood monsters rushed over from all directions, doing their best to stop them from advancing any further. 6 snow-blue rainbow dragons immediately plunged into the densely packed grass elves and slaughtered them as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The whirring black hurricane easily swallowed up the people that swarmed over. This was a completely unbalanced battle. But the countless plant monsters still rushed over without any regard for their lives to die. For a moment, there were endless screams. Wu Feng and Wang Qing's father immediately felt that something was wrong. They hadn't met any resistance along the way. Why did they meet so many people who didn't want their lives here? Could this be Jin Tai and Bai Qi's scheme? Strange. Why are there so many plant monsters helping Jin Tai and Bai Qi without any regard for their lives? De Mingluan, who was hiding on the ancient language tree, was suspicious. He then sighed with some emotion and said, "Rushing over is just throwing away their lives, why bother?" Yu Qianqiu also felt that it was strange. He looked around and his gaze landed on the bronze tree trunk. After a moment of thought, he said with respect, "I understand. They are protecting the ancient language tree we are hiding in, and also the last barrier protecting their home." Chapter 11:23. The Great Bright Will didn't understand what he meant for the time being. It just couldn't bear to see countless grass and wood demons courageously dying. It shook its head gently and said, "The ancient forest has always been isolated from the outside world. It has never had any conflicts with the people outside. It can be said that it stands aloof from the world, but in the end, it can't avoid being implicated by the people outside." Wang Qing, who was wearing a silver mask and a wide blue robe, looked around. He was a little shocked when he saw the grass monsters coming from all directions to die. He faintly felt that they were not necessarily working for Jin Tai and Bai Qi. In a flash, he waved his sleeves, and the 6 rainbow dragons no longer slaughtered wantonly. They quickly converged around his body to defend himself. His eyes flickered, and a voice came from under the silver mask. "We are chasing after Jin Tai and Bai Qi. We have no enmity with you, so why are you trying to stop us?" Before anyone could answer, a cold snort came from the black whirlwind. "A group of reckless evildoers. Those who stop me will die." The range of the whirlwind rapidly expanded, and for a moment, it seemed to have the power to devour the world. The storm-like attacks of the elves were like clay oxen in the sea, and had no effect at all. The violent howling of the black hurricane was like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. It covered the sky and the earth, and the powerful suction it produced quickly spread out, uprooting countless towering ancient trees. The ancient language tree that stood alone on the edge of the cliff stubbornly resisted the strong suction, and its golden leaves all flew toward the whirlwind. The strange thing was that every leaf was extremely firm, and even though it shook violently, not a single leaf fell off. Under the suction of the strong wind, the ancient language tree's gentle whisper turned into a sharp mournful cry, as if it was telling its vicissitudes of life and suffering, as if it was begging for mercy. The burning sea of fire in the distance was rapidly expanding with the help of the wind. The elves had no time to put out the fire, and they all rushed to block the attack of the strong enemy. Seeing the sea of fire gradually expanding in the ancient forest, the mournful cries soared into the sky, and they didn't know why this disaster suddenly befell them. The billowing smoke was sucked in by the whirlwind, blowing past the ancient language tree. The 2 people hiding in the canopy were almost smoked. De Mingluan clenched his fist in front of his nose and said, "Let's go. If this goes on, I'm afraid that even the 2 of us will be implicated." Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging the tree branch tightly in the strong wind, chuckled and said, "There's no rush. There was no hurry. Wait a little longer. If I'm not wrong, there's going to be a good show soon. I guarantee that you'll be able to broaden your horizons. You can't miss this opportunity, hee. Is there a good show to watch?" De Mingluan looked left and right. Seeing the strong hurricane approaching, he suddenly frowned and his eyes lit up. "You mean the one from Wood Killing Sea?" In Wood Monster Sea, under the hollow tree, Lure sat on a tree root. She hugged her legs and rested her chin on her hands, not saying a word. The tears on her pretty face had yet to dry. Mu Yuanzi, who was leaning on his staff, looked down at her from above. This time he didn't blame her. He thought that a child's heart was broken, and that a little sadness would pass. Suddenly, a shrill wail came from a distant mountain. The grandfather and granddaughter pair looked back at the same time, and Mu Yuanzi's expression changed abruptly. He teleported high into the sky, and his eyes shone with a green splendor to see into the distance. He saw the branches and leaves of the ancient language tree on the distant mountain, as if it would be uprooted by a gust of wind at any time. Umph! Mu Yuanzi's angry snort resounded in the air. He pointed his finger at the void, and the profound wave light wall appeared. Fierce winds swept in, and thick black smoke surged in. Mu Yuanzi smelled the sparks in the black smoke, and he immediately became furious. He stepped into the profound wave light wall and disappeared. The murderous hurricane was getting closer and closer, and Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging the tree branch tightly, felt a little overwhelmed. He was annoyed that he was going to miss a good show. Just as he was about to leave with De Mingluan, he heard an angry shout from the sky. Who dares to behave atrociously in my ancient forest? Facing De Mingluan's questioning gaze, Yu Qianqiu's eyes brightened, and he nodded repeatedly, thinking that it was finally here. What arrogance! The immortal netherworld and immortal netherworld are the world of us father and son, and even the ancient forest has to submit. A cold sneer came from the black hurricane, and he seemed to realize that the newcomer's cultivation was profound. His tone changed and he asked, "Who are you?" The wood spirits that had been rushing over from all directions saw Mu Yuanzi's figure suddenly appear in the sky, and their grief and indignation turned into joy. They quickly retreated, no longer making unnecessary sacrifices. At this time, whether it was in the sky or on the ground, all the wood spirits knelt and kowtowed to Mu Yuanzi. Mu Yuanzi waved his hand at the crowd with a grave expression, and said, "All of you go put out the fire." The hidden meaning behind his words was, "Leave this place to me." All the wood spirits immediately obeyed, and rushed to the blazing sea of fire to put out the fire. Wang Qing, who was protected by 6 rainbow dragons, looked at the old man with the walking stick in the sky, and his gaze gradually became serious. The moment he came out, he saw the black hurricane kill countless people. Mu Yuanzi, who did not like to kill, was also angry. Without saying anything, the wooden staff in his hand turned into a stream of light and shot up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, a huge wave was set off in the sky, and a pillar that supported the heavens directly smashed towards the center of the black hurricane like a meteor. Jin Tai and Bai Qi, who were hiding in the distance, suddenly saw a terrifyingly huge wooden staff appear in the sky. Bai Qi's pupils suddenly shrank, while Jin Tai laughed loudly and clapped his hands, saying, "Wonderful, wonderful! We finally summoned old Mu. Bai Qi, let's go help old Mu." The two of them immediately turned into streams of light, and quickly returned. With a loud bang, the heaven and earth shook. The huge wooden staff pierced into the black hurricane, and directly scattered the fierce hurricane. With one move, it broke the fierce hurricane that no one could block. Wu Feng, who was hiding inside, vomited a mouthful of blood on the spot, and was sent flying 1,000 meters away. After breaking through the hurricane, the huge staff stabbed into the ground with a boom, and the ground immediately split into pieces, creating deep ravines. The brown wooden staff that stood between the heaven and earth was simple and unadorned, but it was majestic and awe-inspiring. Mu Yuanzi was standing on the head of the high staff, looking down disdainfully. Wang Qing, whose blue robes fluttered in the wind, was shocked. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and he raised his head to look at the person standing on the head of the staff. He did not expect the other party to break the wind god staff with one move, and heavily injure his father. He immediately activated the sword art, and with a flick of his sleeve, the 6 rainbow dragons immediately roared and attacked. Mu Yuanzi, who was about to be besieged by the 6 dragons, stood there indifferently. Azure light suddenly erupted from the head of the staff beneath his feet. 6 thick, ancient vines shot out from the head of the staff in the blink of an eye, wrapping themselves around the necks of the 6 rainbow dragons with lightning speed. No matter how much the 6 dragons struggled, they were unable to break free. It was a spectacular scene of dragons being tied up in the sky. Without the interference of the hurricane, De Mingluan and Yu Qianqiu, who were hiding in the canopy of the ancient language tree, saw the battle clearly. The two of them looked at each other, unable to conceal the shock in their eyes. Although the two of them knew that Mu Yuanzi was definitely very powerful, they did not expect that he would be able to suppress Wang Qing and Wu Feng with just one move. Yu Qianqiu had originally wanted to ask Bai Changchun to help him deal with Mu Yuanzi so that he could devour him, But after seeing this scene, he immediately dispelled that thought. Without a doubt, the current by Changchun was clearly not Mu Yuanzi's match. Seeing that his six-dragon snow blue sword was trapped, Wang Qing flung his blue robes and sword into the sky, floating at the same level as Mu Yuanzi. He said solemnly, "I did not expect such a powerful expert to be hidden in the ancient forest. Who exactly are you?" Mu Yuanzi snorted coldly and said, "Ignorant juniors, even the number one expert of the three realms, the demon god, had to be courteous when he saw this old man. No matter how arrogant the demon god was in the three realms, he would never come to my ancient forest to act so presumptuously. You guys sure are audacious. Do you really think that this old man has a good temper and will not start a massacre? Even the demon god had to be courteous?" Wang Qing was shocked once more, and he sized up Mu Yuanzi with a bewildered gaze. Why have I never heard of such a formidable expert in the immortal dimension? In a blink of an eye, he slightly understood why Jin Tai's forces had never invaded the ancient forest after so many years of ruling over the immortal dimension. And he also understood why Jin Tai and Bai Qi had lured him and his father to the ancient forest. It turned out that such a formidable figure was hiding here. So it's a hidden expert. Wang Qing cupped his hands and bowed. This junior is the sect master of Heartless Palace, Wang Qing. I didn't mean to offend senior, but I was actually tricked here by Jin Tai and Bai Qi. I hope senior can be magnanimous. You're that Wang Qing who overthrew Jin Tai Immortal Palace. Mu Yuanzi interrupted him, and he recalled what Yu Qianqiu had said to him earlier. He immediately snorted coldly and said, "Good. You really made things difficult for this old man. It's not difficult for me to be magnanimous, and this old man isn't someone who likes to kill, but you dared to act violently in my ancient forest. If I don't punish you, won't my ancient forest be trampled by others in the future?" As he spoke, he glanced at the six-bound rainbow dragons and realized that they were not ordinary treasures. He resolutely shouted, "Leave behind your weapons as punishment and swear never to set foot in my ancient forest again. If you do that, I can let you go." Wang Qing's breath froze. He couldn't leave the six-dragon snow blue sword behind, and he couldn't hand over his father's divine wind staff either. Otherwise, even if he and his father joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for either Jin Tai or Bai Qi. As long as he handed over the treasures he relied on, he wouldn't be far from death. Jin Tai and Bai Qi would definitely retaliate, and this was equivalent to handing over the lives of the father and son. So how could he agree? "Old man Mu, we can't let them go like this." Jin Tai's voice came from afar, and a golden and white light flashed over. Jin Tai, who was holding the golden cloud rod, and Bai Qi, who was controlling the obsidian light mirror, appeared at the same time. Together with Mu Yuanzi, they trapped Wang Qing in the center. Bai Qi was solemnly examining Mu Yuanzi, but Jin Tai looked at Wang Qing and laughed wildly. "Wang Qing, you probably didn't even dream that this day would come. Today I'm going to make you and your father spit out everything you've eaten, including interest." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.